The rusted hinges screeched like a banshee as I pushed open the creaky cabin door. Dust motes danced in the fractured sunlight filtering through boarded windows. It reeked of damp wood and something else, something metallic and acrid. My stomach lurched. We were 4 college friends. Maya, the ever-optimistic cheerleader, Ben, the brooding artist, Sarah, the resident skeptic, and me, Liam, the reluctant tag-along. Camp Tranquility, abandoned for over a decade, was Maya's brilliant idea for a weekend getaway. Now, staring at a single, crimson footprint marking the damp earth outside a locked cabin, my enthusiasm was rapidly dwindling. "Whoa," breathed Ben, his eyes wide. "Looks like someone tracked some serious red in here." "Maybe it's paint," Sarah scoffed, ever the pragmatist. But doubt flickered in her usually steady gaze. We found Maya on the porch, pale and trembling. "The door's locked," she stammered. "And there's a smell." The metallic tang hit me then, a sickening sweetness that made my throat constrict. We exchanged a worried glance. It wasn't paint. We spent the next hour fruitlessly prying at the door. Panic gnawed at me. Camp Tranquility, nestled deep in the Adirondack wilderness of upstate New York, was miles from any help. The phone signal, as expected, was non-existent. Hours bled into a tense, sleepless night. We huddled around a flickering bonfire, the silence punctuated only by the crackling flames and the unsettling rustle of unseen creatures in the undergrowth. The bloody footprint remained a constant, unsettling reminder. Suspicion started to fester. Ben kept glancing nervously at the locked cabin, his face a mask of strained nonchalance. Sarah, usually unflappable, seemed jumpy, her eyes constantly flitting from the woods to the flickering firelight. Maya, usually the life of the party, was a subdued shadow, clutching a rusty axe from somewhere in the cabin. The next morning, the tension reached a breaking point. Ben, ever the risk-taker, broke the lock with a rock. The metallic stench hit us like a physical blow. Inside lay the camp caretaker, Mr. Abernathy, his weathered face frozen in a silent scream. His death was brutal, a testament to a calculated killer, not a random act of violence. Paranoia bloomed, accusations flew. Ben, with his artistic temperament and penchant for the dark, seemed a prime suspect. Maya's cheerfulness became strained, her frantic insistence on finding her missing camera feeling forced. Sarah, ever the outsider, seemed too calm, too collected. Then, a glimmer of truth. Sarah, ever perceptive, noticed a strange symbol carved into the floorboards near Mr. Abernathy's body. A stylized eye with a tear rolling down. Panic jolted through me. It wasn't one of us. It was someone else, someone watching us from the shadows. That night, as we huddled in terror, a figure emerged from the woods. Tall and cloaked, their face hidden in the darkness. They spoke in a raspy voice, a distorted echo of Mr. Abernathy's. "This camp," they rasped, "was built on tragedy. You've disturbed the peace." The next few days were a blur of terror. Sarah was the first to die, a single, silent blow in the dead of night. The symbol was carved near her body. Panic drove Maya into recklessness. She confronted the figure, only to be met with a sickeningly swift end. It was down to me and Ben. Exhaustion gnawed at us, but the will to survive thrummed through me. The final confrontation came on the creaky dock overlooking the lake. Ben, driven mad by fear, lunged at me. We grappled, the struggle taking us both to the edge. He slipped, his scream cut short as he plunged into the murky depths. For a moment, I stood alone, victory bitter in my mouth. Then, I saw it. The symbol, carved into the underside of the rotting dock. A cold dread filled me. Ben wasn't the killer. He was just another pawn in a twisted game. A figure emerged from the woods, cloaked in darkness. The caretaker's distorted voice cackled. "You shouldn't have come here." A horrifying truth dawned on me. The caretaker, fueled by a warped sense of vengeance for a past tragedy at the camp, had been picking us off one by one. His eyes, glinting in the firelight, held a chilling madness. This wasn't a slasher seeking a body count. This was a broken man, seeking a twisted retribution. He lunged, but I was ready. With a last burst of strength, I swung the rusty axe Maya had found, the metal singing a deadly aria through the still air. The impact was sickeningly wet. The caretaker crumpled, a strangled gurgle escaping his throat. But even as his body twitched in its death throes, my elation curdled into a horrifying realization. His eyes, those cold, reptilian eyes, seemed to lock onto something behind me. A flicker of movement in the undergrowth. A low, guttural growl ripped the silence. My heart hammered against my ribs. With a primal scream, I spun around, the axe clutched white-knuckled in my grip. The encroaching darkness coalesced into a horrifying form. A hulking figure, easily twice my size, its face obscured by a tattered burlap sack. Its hands, grotesquely large and inhuman, were tipped with long, razor-sharp claws. The monstrous figure didn't roar, it cackled, a sound that scraped down my spine like fingernails on a chalkboard. It lunged, a blur of muscle and fury. I barely dodged the swipe of its claws, the air singing with the displaced wind. Adrenaline surged through my veins, drowning out the primal fear clawing at my sanity. I danced around the hulking beast, the cabin creaking ominously beneath our feet. My vision blurred as my lungs burned, begging for oxygen. The creature, tireless and relentless, stalked me, each swipe of its claws leaving deep gouges in the rotting wood. Suddenly, I tripped. The axe skittered away across the dusty floorboards, just out of reach. The creature roared its triumph, looming over me, its stench a noxious cocktail of decay and feral hunger. Its claws descended, aiming for my chest. A flash of silver streaked through the air, catching the firelight. Ben, he wasn't dead. He had clawed his way back up from the murky depths of the lake, a shard of wood from the broken dock still clutched in his hand. The grotesque figure roared in surprise as the makeshift spear pierced its chest. It stumbled back, clutching the wound. Taking this fleeting opportunity, I lunged for the fallen axe. Grasping it tightly, I slammed it into the creature's leg, severing its tendon with a sickening snap. The beast let out a blood-curdling shriek, its rage momentarily replaced by pain. But its fury quickly returned, fueling a primal scream as it lunged at Ben, who stood weakened and gasping on the creaky floorboards. Time seemed to slow down. In a desperate act, I hurled the axe towards the flickering fire in the center of the room. It landed with a satisfying clang, sparks erupting and catching the nearby tinder ablaze. Within seconds, flames roared to life, illuminating the decrepit cabin in a flickering, orange glow. The hulking creature recoiled from the sudden heat, its fear momentarily overriding its hunger. Ben used that split second to surge forward, driving the wooden spear deeper into the beast's chest. A final, ear-splitting shriek ripped from its throat as it stumbled back, falling backwards through the rotting wooden wall of the cabin. We watched, hearts pounding in our chests, as the creature disappeared into the darkness, its monstrous form engulfed by the hungry flames. The flames, now uncontrollable, licked at the decaying walls, devouring the cabin in an inferno of orange and red. Ben and I stumbled out into the crisp night air, collapsing onto the damp earth. Exhausted and battered, we watched as the flames consumed the only shelter we had left. The night echoed with the crackling hiss of burning wood, a final chilling symphony to the nightmare we had just endured. As dawn painted the horizon with streaks of pale pink and orange, we stood amidst the smoldering ruins of Camp Tranquility. The caretaker and the monstrous creature were gone, consumed by the very flames they had ignited. But the horror of those long, terrifying nights would forever scar us. The legend of Camp Tranquility wouldn't be forgotten, but retold in hushed whispers, a cautionary tale of a place forever stained by madness and violence. Our escape, however, wasn't quite complete. As we walked away, leaving the smoldering wreckage behind, I noticed something carved into the charred remains of a wooden signpost. The same symbol, the stylized eye with a tear rolling down. It seemed a promise, A chilling reminder that the darkness at Camp Tranquility wasn't entirely vanquished. Somewhere, a secret still lurked, waiting to be unearthed. We stumbled back to civilization, walking ghosts with haunted eyes. News reports painted our story as a tragic drowning accident, Ben's miraculous reappearance a stroke of improbable luck. But the truth gnawed at us, a festering wound that refused to heal. Months later, the nightmares started. Vivid replays of the creature, its grotesque form a recurring torment. Then came the strange occurrences, whispers on the phone that died into static. Fleeting shadows at the corner of my eye, the feeling of being watched. These weren't mere echoes of trauma, something sinister was brewing. One night, it started with a notification. A new friend request on Facebook, the profile picture a blank slate. My stomach lurched, the symbol, carved into the profile picture like a brand. Panic welled as I recognized the username, the Weeping Eye. A single message sat chillingly in my inbox, "You left something unfinished." Desperation clawed at me. I called Ben, his voice shaky on the other end. He confessed to seeing the symbol everywhere. Scrawled on bathroom stalls, etched into park benches, a relentless reminder of our ordeal. We knew what we had to do. Returning to Camp Tranquility was like stepping back into a nightmare. The charred remains of the cabin stood like a skeletal monument, a constant reminder of the monstrous battle. As we crunched over the ash-covered ground, a sickeningly sweet metallic tang filled the air. Suddenly, a glint of metal caught my eye. Partially buried beneath the cinders lay a rusted metal box, a padlock holding it shut. We exchanged a grim look. With trembling hands, we pried it open. Inside, nestled in a bed of shredded denim, was a horrifying sight, a collection of trophies. Fangs, claws, a single, desiccated eye, all radiating an unnatural power. And beneath them, a folded piece of paper, yellowed with age. The paper detailed a local legend, a creature born from a twisted human experiment, a monstrous entity fueled by rage and hunger. It spoke of a ritual, a sacrifice needed to appease the beast, a sacrifice fueled by vengeance. The final sentence sent chills down my spine. The ritual is incomplete. The truth slammed into us. The caretaker was just a pawn. The true orchestrator, the one who unleashed the creature, remained at large. And the symbol, the Weeping Eye, was their calling card. A twig snapped behind us. We whirled around, hearts pounding in our chests. A cloaked figure emerged from the woods, its face obscured by shadow. But the glint of a polished metal blade in their hand left no room for doubt. The ensuing fight was a brutal ballet of desperation. Ben, fueled by a righteous fury, grappled with the figure. I lunged for a fallen branch, swinging it like a club. The air was thick with the metallic tang of blood and the grunts of primal struggle. Ben faltered, a deep gash across his arm spilling crimson onto the ashen ground. Rage boiled within me. With a roar, I smashed the branch into the figure's back. They stumbled, dropping the blade. We lunged for it simultaneously, our fingers brushing against the cold metal. A struggle ensued, a silent wrestling match fueled by adrenaline and fear. Finally, with a desperate shove, I sent the figure sprawling. I snatched the blade, its weight strangely familiar in my hand. The figure rose, their face hidden in the shadows, their voice a chilling rasp. "Fools," they spat, "you can't stop it. The ritual will be complete." The words sparked a horrifying realization. This wasn't about revenge, it was about power. They planned to unleash the creature again, this time stronger, more monstrous. Terror and a twisted sense of grim determination warred within me. There was only one solution, a horrific choice that would forever stain my soul. With a choked sob, I raised the blade, my hand trembling. The figure lunged, but I was faster. The blade met flesh with a sickening squelch. A scream, unlike anything I'd ever heard, ripped through the air before cutting short. As the figure crumpled onto the ashen ground, their true identity finally revealed. A seemingly unassuming park ranger we'd encountered on the way back to civilization. A chilling reminder that evil can lurk anywhere. But the victory tasted hollow. Ben lay sprawled on the ground, his breathing shallow. The symbol of the weeping eye remained, a chilling reminder that the darkness at Camp Tranquility wasn't vanquished. It had simply shifted, waiting for the next foolhardy soul to disturb its slumber. The weight of the knowledge of my actions pressed down on me. I knelt beside Ben, praying that he would pull through. As the first rays of dawn filtered through the smoke-choked sky, painting the charred remains of Camp Tranquility in an eerie orange glow, a low, guttural growl ripped through the silence. It wasn't the monstrous roar we'd grown accustomed to, but a deeper, more primal sound that sent shivers down my spine. Ben, his face pale and slick with sweat, mumbled weakly, "It's not over." "Is it?" His voice echoed the chilling realization that had settled in my gut like a venomous snake. The growl grew closer, a rhythmic thud accompanying it. Something was emerging from the smoldering ruins of the cabin. Something bigger, something far more terrifying. We scrambled back, the metallic tang of blood heavy in the air. Then, it emerged. It wasn't the hulking beast from before, but a grotesque amalgamation of flesh and fire. The caretaker's body formed the core, his charred features twisted into a permanent screen. Wisps of flame danced around him, birthed from the inferno that had consumed the cabin. Claws, longer and sharper than before, protruded from his mangled limbs. "You," the creature rasped, its voice a cacophony of crackling flames and tortured screams, "you disturbed the ritual. Now, you will become part of it." Panic clawed at my throat. This monstrosity was beyond anything we'd faced before. The blade in my hand felt pathetically inadequate. A glance at Ben confirmed my worst fears. He was unconscious, his shallow breaths barely registering. Thinking fast, I grabbed a smoldering log from the remains of the campfire. The heat singed my skin, but the urgency of the situation pushed through the pain. I hurled it at the creature, the burning wood making contact with its fiery form. The silence that followed was deafening. My lungs burned, my vision blurred with tears and smoke. Slowly, the steam cleared, revealing a scene from hell. Ben lay sprawled on the ground, unconscious but seemingly unharmed. The creature, however, was a different story. Its fiery form flickered erratically, smoke billowing from extinguished flames. Its once enraged screams had turned into a pathetic whimper as it clawed at its smoldering flesh. It was a horrific sight, but a sight that ignited a cold fury within me. This creature, this embodiment of twisted vengeance, had taken too much. With a primal yell, I charged towards it, the blade held high. The creature turned its burning eyes towards me, its whimper morphing into a final, desperate roar. I brought the blade down in a single, brutal arc, severing the connection between its flaming head and charred torso. The roar cut short, replaced by a hiss as the creature collapsed into a smoldering heap. As the last embers died out, a heavy silence settled over Camp Tranquility. Broken only by my ragged gasps for breath, I stumbled towards Ben, collapsing beside him. Relief washed over me, tinged with a profound sense of horror. We had survived, but at what cost? The nightmares would no doubt return, more vivid and terrifying than ever. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, casting long shadows across the ashen remains of the camp, a new wave of fear washed over me. The symbol of the weeping eye remained, etched into the charred remains of a signpost. A chilling reminder that evil isn't easily vanquished. Somewhere, another darkness might be stirring, waiting for its chance to be unleashed on the unsuspecting world. But for now, all I could do was hold my breath, listen to Ben's weak but steady breaths, and pray that the nightmare was truly over. Deep down, however, I knew the chilling truth: the darkness at Camp Tranquility may have been quelled, but the horror story we'd lived through was far from over. It would bleed into the real world, staining the sterile safety of social media with its grotesque reality. The first sign came a week later. Scrolling mindlessly through Facebook, a new friend request popped up. The profile picture, blank. The username, The Burning One. A cold sweat slicked my skin. It couldn't be. Not again. Clicking on the profile, a single, gruesome video played on autoplay. It was filmed from a shaky hand, the flickering light revealing a charred landscape. In the center, a smoldering figure writhed on the ground, its screams a distorted echo of the creature we'd faced. Then, the camera panned up, revealing a face obscured by shadow, a single, menacing eye glowing red in the darkness. The video ended abruptly. A message blinked below, "The ritual continues." Panic clawed at my throat. I wasn't sure who sent the video, but it was a clear message someone knew. Someone was watching. The paranoia that had festered at Camp Tranquility returned with a vengeance. Every notification, every friend request felt like a potential threat. Sleep became a luxury I couldn't afford. Every creak of the floorboard, every rustle of leaves outside my window sent shivers down my spine. Ben, though physically recovering, remained haunted by the ordeal. His nightmares bled into his waking hours, his eyes constantly scanning for unseen threats. We reached out to the police, desperate to explain the horrors we'd witnessed. But without any concrete evidence, our story sounded like the ravings of traumatized minds. The park ranger we'd killed became our only lead, but it led nowhere. Days turned into weeks, the oppressive silence punctuated only by the nagging fear gnawing at our sanity. Then, the attacks began. Subtle at first, a slashed tire, a cryptic message scrawled on the door, but escalating in intensity. One night, a Molotov cocktail smashed through my window, engulfing my apartment in flames. I barely escaped with my life, the taste of acrid smoke clinging to my throat. The message, scrawled on the singed wall, burned into my memory: "You can't escape the ritual." Quote. The attacks became a terrifying game of cat and mouse. We moved from place to place, constantly looking over our shoulders. But the unseen enemy seemed to be always one step ahead. Our Facebook profiles became battlegrounds, filled with gruesome images and videos depicting rituals and sacrifices. The followers of the Burning One started appearing faceless profiles with the symbol of the weeping eye as their avatar. They taunted us online, reveling in our fear. The line between reality and the online horror blurred with every notification. Desperate, we reached out to a tech expert, a friend of a friend who specialized in the dark underbelly of the internet. He confirmed our worst fears. The Weeping Eye wasn't just a random username. It was a deep web cult obsessed with summoning a monstrous entity fueled by violence and sacrifice. The videos, they were real. The attacks, a twisted offering to their dark god. He warned us that escaping the online world wouldn't save us. The ritual, he explained, wasn't confined to Facebook. It was spilling over, bleeding into the real world. They were hunting us, not just online, but physically. His words proved chillingly prophetic. The next attack came not in the form of a notification, but a brutal assault in a deserted alleyway. A group of figures, their faces obscured by masks emblazoned with the weeping eye symbol, attacked us with a ferocity born of fanaticism. Ben, fueled by a desperate rage, fought back with a ferocity that mirrored their own. But we were outnumbered. I watched in horror as they pinned him down, a glint of metal catching the flickering streetlight. A scream tore from my throat, a primal sound fueled by terror and a newfound resolve. Grabbing a discarded brick, I slammed it into the head of the closest figure. The sickening thud was drowned out by the ringing in my ears. The attackers faltered, momentarily stunned. Using the opportunity, I grabbed Ben and dragged him towards the safety of the shadows. We ran, the pounding of our hearts a frantic rhythm against the night. We didn't stop running until we collapsed, gasping for breath, in the dimly lit sanctuary of a late-night diner. The world outside seemed oblivious to the horror that stalked us, a terrifying juxtaposition to the very real fear gnawing at our souls. As dawn painted the sky a pale orange, a single thought echoed in my mind: this wasn't over. The fight for survival wasn't confined to dark alleyways and flickering screens. It had become a war waged across the digital and physical realms, a chilling reminder that the darkness we'd faced at Camp Tranquility had metastasized into something far more monstrous. Our tech expert, a wiry man named Alex with eyes that held more shadows than sleep, became our anchor in this digital storm. He guided us through the labyrinthine corridors of the dark web, deciphering cryptic messages and uncovering hidden forums dedicated to the Burning One. The images and videos that greeted us were enough to turn a saint's stomach. Ritual sacrifices performed under flickering candlelight, grotesque symbols carved into human flesh, and pronouncements of an impending awakening sent chills down my spine. But amongst the depravity, Alex unearthed a glimmer of hope. A legend whispered amongst the cultists spoke of a counter-ritual, a way to sever the connection between the physical world and the entity they were attempting to summon. It was a long shot, a desperate gamble, but it was all we had. The ritual, however, required 3 artifacts: an obsidian knife, a chalice filled with the blood of an innocent, and a human bone imbued with ancient magic. The thought of obtaining these items, especially the blood, sent a wave of nausea through me. But Ben, his eyes haunted by a burning resolve, wouldn't hear of turning back. The hunt for the artifacts became a race against time. We scoured the internet, deciphering cryptic clues hidden within the cult forums. We ventured into the seedy underbelly of the city, bartering with occult shops and shady pawnbrokers. Each acquisition was a victory tinged with horror. The obsidian knife, purchased from a hunched figure shrouded in darkness, felt cold and hungry in my hand. The chalice, obtained through a brutal street fight, remained stained with the blood of a nameless thug. And the human bone, unearthed from a desecrated grave under the pale glow of a full moon, held the faint echo of a long-forgotten scream. As we assembled the artifacts in a makeshift altar in Alex's dimly lit apartment, a palpable tension filled the air. The silence was broken only by the nervous patter of rain against the windowpane and the frantic pounding of our hearts. Following the instructions gleaned from the dark web, we began the ritual. Alex chanted in a language that scraped against my sanity, his voice rising and falling in a hypnotic rhythm. The atmosphere crackled with power, the air thick with anticipation. Suddenly, a notification buzzed on my phone. It was a live video feed from the Burning One. On screen, a group of hooded figures stood chanting around a blazing pyre. In the center, a writhing figure, a grotesque parody of humanity, seemed to be clawing its way into existence. Panic threatened to consume me, but forcing myself to focus, I completed the ritual, plunging the obsidian knife into the human bone. A surge of energy ripped through the room, the lights flickering wildly before extinguishing entirely. We were plunged into darkness, the only sound the sound of our ragged breaths and the distorted screech emanating from the live feed. Then, an ear-splitting shriek filled the room, a sound that seemed to claw at the very fabric of reality. The video feed flickered, showing the writhing figure dissolve into a cloud of ash. Then, silence, a heavy, suffocating silence. Light flickered back on, revealing Alex slumped against the wall, his face pale and damp with sweat. Had we succeeded? A wave of relief washed over me, so intense it felt like a physical blow. But the celebration was short-lived. A notification on my phone buzzed once more. It was a single image, a picture of the smoldering ruins of Camp Tranquility, with a single sentence scrawled across it: "The ritual is only the beginning." The blood drained from my face. That wasn't victory, it was a declaration of war. The darkness we'd faced wasn't vanquished, merely redirected. And somewhere out there, in the vast expanse of the digital world, they were already plotting their next move. This wasn't the end of the story, it was just the beginning of a terrifying new chapter. And in that moment, as I stared at the chilling message on my screen, I knew this fight wasn't over. It had only just begun. Sleep became a stranger, replaced by a constant, gnawing dread. Every notification, every flickering message light on my phone, sent a jolt of adrenaline through my system. We moved again, this time to a remote cabin nestled deep in the mountains, miles away from any semblance of civilization. Alex, our tech-savvy savior, had secured the place a secluded haven with limited internet access, a necessary evil for our continued research. But the solace of isolation was short-lived. The nightmares returned, vivid replays of the creature at Camp Tranquility, its grotesque form morphing with the horrors we'd witnessed online. Ben fared no better, his haunted eyes reflecting a simmering rage that worried me more than any unseen threat. One night, a blood-curdling scream ripped through the stillness. I bolted awake, heart hammering against my ribs, to find Ben gone. Panic clawed at my throat as I raced outside, the crisp mountain air biting at my lungs. A fire crackled in the clearing, casting flickering shadows on the surrounding trees. And there, bathed in the orange glow, stood Ben. But it wasn't Ben. His eyes glowed with an unnatural red light, his face contorted in a feral snarl. In his hand, he clutched the obsidian knife, its surface slick with a viscous, black liquid. "The ritual is incomplete," a voice rasped from his throat, a distorted echo of the creature we'd faced. "Join us, and the suffering will end." A primal scream escaped my throat. This wasn't some twisted possession, it was something far more insidious. The entity we'd fought was using Ben, using the blood sacrifice of the ritual to weave its way into our world. The fight that followed was a brutal ballet of desperation and rage. Driven by a maddened fury, Ben lunged at me, the obsidian knife flashing in the firelight. We grappled, a tangle of limbs and desperate pleas. I dodged a swipe of the knife, feeling the cold wind of death brush past my ear. Thinking fast, I lunged for a nearby branch, snapping it off with a sharp crack. Raising it high, I brought it down on Ben's shoulder with a sickening thud. He roared in pain, momentarily stunned. Using the opportunity, I snatched the chalice from the makeshift altar and hurled its contents, the blood of the thug, into the fire. The flames erupted in a violent burst, tinged in unnatural green. Ben screamed, a sound that seemed to tear at the fabric of reality itself. He writhed on the ground, his body convulsing as the entity fought to maintain its hold. Seizing my chance, I lunged forward and plunged the obsidian knife into his chest. A geyser of black ichor erupted from the wound, the stench of brimstone filling the air. Ben's scream cut short, replaced by a guttural gurgle as his eyes dimmed, the red glow fading away. He crumpled onto the ground, lifeless. Grief, sharp and sudden, threatened to overwhelm me. But the fight wasn't over. The fire continued to burn, an emerald inferno defying the laws of nature. With a final, earth-shattering roar, the flames coalesced into a grotesque figure, a twisted amalgam of the creature from Camp Tranquility and the monstrous entity from the video. It lunged at me, a maw filled with razor-sharp teeth snapping at my throat. Adrenaline surged through my veins, fueling a desperate fight for survival. I dodged its attacks, the stench of burning flesh acrid in my nostrils. Grabbing another branch, I slammed it into the creature's leg, the sound of splintering bone echoing through the clearing. It roared in pain, momentarily distracted. Using that opening, I scrambled back towards the altar. The obsidian knife lay discarded on the ground, its surface slick with black ichor. It was my only hope. As the creature lunged again, I grabbed the knife and charged. With a primal yell, I plunged the blade deep into its chest, aiming for the pulsating red heart that lay exposed beneath its tattered flesh. A shriek that defied description ripped through the night. The creature writhed, its form dissolving into a cloud of black smoke. The fire sputtered and died, leaving behind only a pile of smoldering ash. I collapsed onto the blood-stained ground, gasping for breath. My body ached, my mind reeling from the sheer brutality of the encounter. Ben lay still beside me, a pale reminder of the horrific cost of victory. As dawn painted the sky a pale pink and orange, a wave of exhaustion washed over me. But amidst the overwhelming fatigue, a single chilling thought echoed in my mind: this wasn't over. The message on my phone was a grim prophecy, not a mere threat. The entity might be vanquished, for now, but the darkness it represented still lurked within the digital labyrinth. And somewhere, out there, in the anonymous corners of the dark web, the burning one would adapt, evolve, and wait. The following weeks were a blur of grief, paranoia, and a desperate attempt at normalcy. Alex, his face etched with lines of worry, helped me bury Ben beneath a towering oak tree overlooking the valley. The silence of the grave echoed the hollowness within me. We dismantled the makeshift altar, the obsidian knife and the empty chalice, the only remaining testaments to the nightmare we'd endured. Alex, with a grim determination, started working on a firewall, a digital fortress designed to shield us from the encroaching darkness. But the solace was short-lived. One morning, I awoke to a notification on my phone. It was a single video, the profile picture blank, the username, The Embers. I clicked on it with a morbid curiosity that instantly curdled into dread. The video showed a group of figures, their faces obscured by masks emblazoned with the weeping eye symbol, gathered around a flickering bonfire. In the center, a metal cage hung precariously above the flames. Inside, a lone figure writhed, their screams muffled but unmistakable. It was Sarah. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the chilling silence of the cabin. A distorted voice rasped over the video, a voice that sent shivers down my spine. "The ritual continues," it said, the words dripping with malice. "Join us or watch her burn." Terror clawed at my throat. This wasn't just a threat, it was a declaration of war. They were playing a twisted game, using the very tools that had birthed this horror social media to taunt and torment us. But this time, their threats wouldn't work. This time, I wouldn't run. Grief, raw and searing, morphed into a cold, steely resolve. They had taken Ben, they had almost taken me, but they wouldn't take Sarah. Not without a fight. A frantic plan took shape in my mind, a desperate gamble fueled by vengeance and a sliver of hope. Alex, his eyes wide with concern, listened to my plan in stunned silence. "It's too dangerous," he finally choked out. "They're expecting you." "I know," I said, my voice tight with a newfound resolve. "But it's the only way." The next few days were a whirlwind of feverish activity. Alex, his initial trepidation replaced by a grim determination, helped me track down the location of the ritual. It was an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city, a haven for the fringes of society. We armed ourselves not with guns or knives, but with knowledge. Alex, a digital warrior in his own right, devised a plan to disrupt their online presence, to sow discord within their ranks. I, fueled by a righteous fury, would infiltrate the warehouse and rescue Sarah. The night of the ritual arrived, a dark shroud descending upon the city. Disguised in a dark hoodie and armed with a crowbar, I slipped into the labyrinthine alleys behind the warehouse. The air crackled with a sense of foreboding, the flickering neon signs casting grotesque shadows on the damp brick walls. Following the faint strains of chanting, I found myself at a massive metal door. With a deep breath, I slammed the crowbar against the rusty hinges, the sound echoing through the deserted alleyway. A moment later, the door creaked open, revealing a scene from hell. The cavernous warehouse was bathed in the flickering orange glow of a massive bonfire. Around it, figures danced in a macabre ritual, their faces hidden by masks. And suspended high above the flames, trapped in a metal cage, Sarah hung screaming. Adrenaline surged through my veins, drowning out the primal fear clawing at my insides. With a deafening roar, I charged into the warehouse, swinging the crowbar like a madman. My attack was met with surprise, then chaos. The cultists, armed with makeshift weapons, retaliated with a ferocity born of fanaticism. The ensuing fight was a brutal ballet of desperation. The air grew thick with the stench of sweat, blood, and burning flesh. I dodged blows, disarmed opponents, the crowbar a deadly extension of my own rage. Finally, I reached the cage holding Sarah. With a single, powerful swing, I shattered the lock, the metal clanging to the floor. Sarah stumbled out, her face pale and streaked with tears. Sarah stumbled out, her face pale and streaked with tears. Before we could embrace, a guttural roar ripped through the chaos. A hulking figure, its face obscured by a tattered executioner's hood, emerged from the shadows, a massive cleaver dripping with fresh blood held high. This wasn't a cultist, it was their champion, a monstrous entity fueled by the very darkness they worshipped. It lunged at me, the cleaver flashing in the firelight. I barely dodged the blow, the wind whistling past my ear. Sarah screamed, a sound that snapped me out of my momentary fear. Shoving her towards the shadows at the edge of the warehouse, I grabbed a nearby metal pipe, its surface cold and slick with grime. The fight with the hulking figure was a desperate struggle for survival. My blows, fueled by adrenaline, landed with a sickening thud, but seemed to have little effect on the monstrous creature. It roared again, swinging the cleaver with a terrifying strength. Just as I thought I was done for, a deafening explosion rocked the warehouse. Flames erupted from the far end, the cultists' makeshift online broadcasting equipment going up in a fiery inferno. Alex, he'd done it. He'd disrupted their online ritual, thrown their dark ceremony into disarray. The distraction was momentary, but it was enough. Spotting a loose chain hanging from a rusty beam above the bonfire, I lunged forward and wrapped it around the hulking figure's ankle. With a desperate heave, I pulled. The creature stumbled, thrown off balance. Seizing my opportunity, I brought the metal pipe down on its head with a sickening crack. The creature roared in pain, its grip on the cleaver loosening. I shoved the pipe into the wound, twisting it with a feral scream. The hulking figure crumpled to the ground, its body convulsing. Silence descended upon the warehouse, broken only by the crackling of the flames and the ragged gasps of the remaining cultists. But the victory was short-lived. The flames from the bonfire, now completely out of control, were rapidly engulfing the warehouse. Trapped in a furnace of our own making, we had to escape. Grabbing Sarah's hand, I led her through the maze of bodies and burning debris. The heat was stifling, the smoke acrid in my lungs. Each cough felt like shards of glass tearing at my throat. Suddenly, a searing pain lanced through my leg. I looked down to see a metal rod, protruding from a fallen beam, had pierced my flesh. A scream tore from my throat, a raw, primal sound. Sarah stopped, her eyes filled with terror. "Go!" I rasped, shoving her towards the exit I could see flickering in the distance. "Don't worry about me, just get out of here." Tears streamed down her face, but she knew I was right. With a final desperate look, she turned and fled, her silhouette swallowed by the thickening smoke. I collapsed onto the burning floor, the pain in my leg a white-hot agony. The flames danced closer, their heat unbearable. I closed my eyes, accepting my fate. Then, a deafening roar filled the air. The roof caved in, a torrent of debris raining down. For a moment, there was only darkness and a suffocating silence. When I finally opened my eyes, I was staring up at a star-strewn sky. Coughing and spluttering, I sat up, my body a mass of aches and pains. The warehouse was gone, reduced to a smoldering ruin. Somehow, I had been thrown clear by the collapsing roof. But where was Sarah? Panic clawed at my throat as I scanned the debris-strewn landscape. Then, a faint moan reached my ears. Following the sound, I found Sarah, buried under a pile of twisted metal. With a Herculean effort, I managed to pull her free. She was unconscious, but alive. Relief washed over me, so intense it felt like a physical blow. Ignoring the throbbing pain in my leg, I cradled her head in my lap, tears streaming down my face. We had survived, but at what cost? Ben was gone, the memory of his haunted eyes forever etched in my mind. The darkness we'd faced wasn't vanquished, merely mutated. And somewhere, out there, in the shadows of the digital world, they were already plotting their revenge. As the first rays of dawn painted the sky a pale orange, I pulled Sarah closer, her ragged breaths a comforting rhythm against the chilling silence of the ravaged warehouse. We were wounded, broken, but alive. And in that moment, a new kind of terror settled in my gut, a cold dread that eclipsed the raw pain throbbing in my leg. The silence, once a canvas for the symphony of destruction, now screamed with a horrifying possibility. The embers might have failed tonight, but they wouldn't stop. This wasn't the end, it was a terrifying intermission. We limped away from the smoldering ruins, Sarah leaning heavily on me, her face a canvas of soot and dried tears. Every groan that escaped her lips was a fresh stab of fear. Reaching a deserted gas station on the outskirts of the city, we managed to steal a beat-up pickup truck, its faded paint job offering a strange sense of anonymity. As I steered the truck through the pre-dawn darkness, a single thought echoed in my mind: Alex. The warehouse had been a digital battlefield as much as a physical one. He'd been the one to disrupt their online ritual, the one who'd thrown their ceremony into chaos. But had it been enough? Was he safe? The answer came in the form of a notification on my phone, a single, gruesome video. My stomach lurched as I recognized the flickering light and macabre symbols from the warehouse. But this time, the focus wasn't on the burning pyre. It was on Alex. He was strapped to a makeshift wooden chair, his face pale and bruised. A masked figure stood behind him, a gleaming cleaver held high. A distorted voice rasped over the video, a voice dripping with malice. "You meddled with forces beyond your comprehension," it said. "Now, you pay the price." The video ended abruptly. A primal scream tore from my throat, a sound that echoed through the empty truck cab. Grief, raw and searing, threatened to consume me. Alex, the quiet tech genius who'd become our anchor in this digital nightmare, was gone. His sacrifice, however, had bought us precious time. We needed to disappear, to vanish into the digital wilderness where the embers couldn't find us. But where? The answer came from the unlikeliest of sources: a cryptic message embedded within the video itself, a distorted whisper hidden beneath the soundtrack. It was a single word: cipher. Hope, a fragile ember, flickered within me. Cipher. It could be a location, a safe haven, or perhaps something more. With Sarah barely conscious beside me, I steered the truck towards the rising sun, a single, desperate prayer echoing in my mind that cipher was real, and that it offered the sanctuary we so desperately craved. The journey that followed was a blur of dusty highways and endless stretches of desolate landscape. Sarah's injuries, though not life-threatening, required constant attention. I cleaned her wounds with trembling hands, the metallic tang of blood a constant reminder of the horrors we'd endured. Days bled into nights, the flickering glow of my phone screen the only source of light in the truck's cramped interior. I scoured the dark web, searching for any mention of cipher. Days turned into weeks, each dead end chipping away at my fragile hope. Then, one night, as exhaustion gnawed at my sanity, a single, flickering thread emerged from the digital abyss. A hidden forum, accessible only through a complex series of proxies and password resets. The forum's title, The Unseen Ones. My heart hammered against my ribs as I typed in the cryptic password gleaned from the video message. The screen flickered, then resolved into a dimly lit chatroom. A handful of usernames scrolled by, each one anonymous, each one shrouded in an aura of mystery. With trembling fingers, I typed a single message: cipher. Do you know anything about it? Silence. Then, a single line of text appeared on the screen. A sanctuary for the hunted. But entry comes at a cost. A shiver ran down my spine. Cost? What kind of cost? But before I could ask, another message appeared. Are you prepared to pay? I looked at Sarah, her ragged breaths a fragile melody in the oppressive silence of the cab. Was I prepared to pay? The answer, laced with a bitter resolve, formed in my mind. Yes, I typed, hitting enter with a force that rattled the keyboard. The fight with the hulking figure was a desperate struggle for survival. My blows, fueled by adrenaline, landed with a sickening thud, but seemed to have little effect on the monstrous creature. It roared again, swinging the cleaver with a terrifying strength. Just as I thought I was done for, a deafening explosion rocked the warehouse. Flames erupted from the far end, the cultists' makeshift online broadcasting equipment going up in a fiery inferno. Alex, he'd done it. He'd disrupted their online ritual, thrown their dark ceremony into disarray. The distraction was momentary, but it was enough. Spotting a loose chain hanging from a rusty beam above the bonfire, I lunged forward and wrapped it around the hulking figure's ankle. With a desperate heave, I pulled. The creature stumbled, thrown off balance. Seizing my opportunity, I brought the metal pipe down on its head with a sickening crack. The creature roared in pain, its grip on the cleaver loosening. I shoved the pipe into the wound, twisting it with a feral scream. The hulking figure crumpled to the ground, its body convulsing. Silence descended upon the warehouse, broken only by the crackling of the flames and the ragged gasps of the remaining cultists. But the victory was short-lived. The flames from the bonfire, now completely out of control, were rapidly engulfing the warehouse. Trapped in a furnace of our own making, we had to escape. Grabbing Sarah's hand, I led her through the maze of bodies and burning debris. The heat was stifling, the smoke acrid in my lungs. Each cough felt like shards of glass tearing at my throat. Suddenly, a searing pain lanced through my leg. I looked down to see a metal rod, protruding from a fallen beam, had pierced my flesh. A scream tore from my throat, a raw, primal sound. Sarah stopped, her eyes filled with terror. "Go," I rasped, shoving her towards the exit I could see flickering in the distance. "Don't worry about me, just get out of here." The screen flickered again, revealing a single image, a grainy satellite photo of a remote island chain. A cluster of tiny dots nestled amidst a vast expanse of blue. Below the image, a single line of text, "Find your way there. We'll be waiting." The message hung there, a chilling promise and a terrifying ultimatum. Cypher was a gamble, a desperate leap into the unknown fueled by a thirst for vengeance and a sliver of hope for survival. The satellite image revealed a cluster of 5 islands, volcanic spires jutting out of the turquoise embrace of the Pacific Ocean. No names, no coordinates, just a chilling isolation that both terrified and exhilarated me. Finding someone who could navigate us to this digital ghost town on the high seas proved to be another harrowing ordeal. Shady back alley bars and whispers in dimly lit internet cafes led me to a grizzled old sea captain with a face etched by the unforgiving sun and a soul as dark as the ocean depths. The price for passage was exorbitant, a hefty chunk of the meager savings I'd managed to salvage from my old life. But money wasn't the only currency Captain Skull demanded. He wanted a story, a glimpse into the horrors that had driven a man this far. As I recounted the events at Camp Tranquility, the warehouse battle, and the chilling videos, a flicker of something akin to pity crossed his weathered face. "The weeping eye," he muttered, his voice a gravelly rasp. "They've been stirring trouble for far too long." The journey across the Pacific was a test of endurance. Sarah, weakened by her injuries, spent most of the time confined to the cramped cabin, the rhythmic rocking of the boat a constant reminder of our precarious situation. Captain Skull, a man of few words, kept to himself, his weathered gaze fixed on the horizon. One starless night, a storm erupted with a fury that rivaled the chaos within me. The boat pitched and tossed like a toy in a bathtub, waves crashing against the hull with thunderous booms. Below deck, I held Sarah close, the metallic tang of her fear a counterpoint to the storm's deafening roar. As dawn finally broke, painting the sky with streaks of bruised orange and purple, the storm subsided as abruptly as it had begun. Stepping out onto the deck, I gasped. There, in the distance, a cluster of islands rose from the sea, their volcanic peaks shrouded in a veil of mist. Cypher, Captain Skull steered the boat towards the largest island, a foreboding mass of black rock and verdant jungle. As we neared the shore, a sense of foreboding settled over me. The air hung heavy with an unnatural stillness, broken only by the screech of unseen birds. A rickety wooden dock jutted out from the shoreline, its weathered planks groaning under the weight of our apprehension. Captain Skull, his expression unreadable, threw me a weathered satchel. "Your payment," he rumbled. "Consider it a down payment for keeping my silence." With a curt nod, he turned the boat and steered away, leaving us stranded on the deserted shore. We watched the vessel disappear into the horizon, a knot of unease tightening in my gut. Cypher might have offered sanctuary, but at what cost? Heaving the satchel onto my shoulder, I helped Sarah onto the dock. Taking a deep breath, I stepped onto the damp sand, the unfamiliar texture sinking between my toes. Ahead, a narrow path, barely visible beneath a canopy of thick foliage, beckoned us forward. We ventured into the jungle, the dense vegetation casting an oppressive green gloom. The air was thick with the scent of decaying vegetation and the incessant hum of unseen insects. Every rustle of leaves, every crack of a twig, sent a jolt of adrenaline through my system. "Perhaps," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "But before this gets messy, let me show you something." With a swift movement, I ripped open the satchel and held up the intricately carved box. Recognition flickered in the leader's eyes, replaced by a flicker of fear. "The failsafe," he hissed. "You shouldn't have brought that here." "Maybe not," I said, taking a deep breath. "But it gives us a fighting chance, wouldn't you say?" I wasn't sure what the box contained, what power it held. But the fear in the leader's eyes was enough to give me a sliver of hope. A tense silence descended upon the clearing. The figures and shadows remained still, their predatory gazes fixed on us. The leader's eyes darted between me and the box, a silent debate raging within him. "Very well," he finally conceded, his voice laced with a hint of desperation. "Perhaps there's room for negotiation. But know this: the ritual continues. And you, if you wish to survive, will play your part." My stomach churned. Negotiation? What kind of negotiation could there be with these monsters? But I had no choice. Sarah's whimper echoed in my ears, a desperate plea for survival. "What do you want?" I rasped, the words a bitter pill to swallow. The leader's grin returned, wider this time, crueler. "Sacrifice," he said, his voice dripping with relish. "But not yours. Not yet, at least." He gestured towards the satchel, his eyes lingering on the weathered charts Captain Skull had provided. "Bring us more. Bring us others who have dabbled in the darkness, who have caught the eye's attention. Become our shepherd, and we might just allow you and your little companion to live, for a while." The weight of his words settled on me like a lead blanket. Become their shepherd? Lead others to their slaughter? A wave of nausea washed over me, the taste of bile rising in my throat. But as I looked into Sarah's terrified eyes, a cold resolve solidified within me. Survival, it was all that mattered now. Survival, and maybe, just maybe, a chance for revenge down the line. "All right," I spat out the words, the taste of ash in my mouth. "We'll do it, but make no mistake, this isn't an alliance. It's a ceasefire, and one wrong move." I gripped the failsafe box tighter, the carved wood digging into my palm, "and this little game ends very badly for you." The leader considered this for a moment. Then a humorless chuckle escaped his lips. "A ceasefire, then. Let's hope you live long enough to regret it." He snapped his fingers, and the cloaked figures surged forward. But this time, they weren't there to attack. They were there to guide us, deeper into the heart of the island, towards a future as horrifying and uncertain as the one we'd barely escaped. We walked, Sarah clinging to me, a silent oath echoing in my mind. I would survive this twisted game. I would find a way to dismantle this network of darkness from within. And when the time came, the failsafe, whatever power it held, would be my weapon, my vengeance against the we ventured into the island's heart. The thicker the air grew, heavy with the stench of decay and a cloying sweetness that scraped against the back of my throat. The jungle canopy swallowed the last vestiges of sunlight, plunging us into an oppressive twilight. The path, barely a discernible trail through the dense undergrowth, twisted and turned, leading us in a disorienting spiral. Our escorts, silent wraiths in their black robes, remained a constant, unsettling presence. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig sent shivers down my spine. Sarah, her face pale and drawn, leaned heavily against me, her silence a testament to the terror that gnawed at us both. Finally, The path opened into a vast clearing bathed in an unnatural, sickly green glow. In the center stood a monolithic structure, a grotesque fusion of volcanic rock and twisted metal, its surface pulsing with an otherworldly light. Atop the structure, a sigil, a monstrous, weeping eye, burned with an infernal intensity. This was the heart of their darkness, the nexus of their power. Fear, cold and primal, threatened to consume me. But the image of Sarah, her vulnerability a stark counterpoint to the monstrous edifice before us, fueled a surge of defiance. The leader, a chilling smile etched on his gaunt face, gestured towards the structure. "This is the altar," he rasped, his voice echoing in the oppressive silence. "This is where the ritual finds its completion. And this," he turned towards Sarah, his eyes gleaming with a predatory hunger, "this will be the offering." A primal scream tore from my throat. This wasn't the deal. They'd lied. But before I could react, a searing pain erupted in my shoulder. One of the cloaked figures had lashed out, a wickedly barbed blade digging into my flesh. Adrenaline surged through me, drowning out the pain. With a roar, I shoved Sarah behind me and lunged at the attacker. A brutal fight ensued, a desperate scramble for survival in the shadow of the monstrous altar. The cloaked figures, surprisingly agile despite their bulky robes, fought with a feral intensity. The stench of blood filled the air, a metallic tang mingling with the cloying sweetness. My punches and kicks landed with sickening thuds, but they seemed to have little effect on my assailants. Just as I felt myself tiring, a glint of metal caught my eye. The blade that had pierced my shoulder lay discarded on the damp ground. I lunged for it, ignoring the searing pain, and came up with the weapon clutched in my hand. It felt alien in my grasp, but it was my only chance. The fight became a bloody ballet, a desperate dance of survival. I slashed and parried, the metallic clang echoing through the clearing. One by one, I took them down. Some fell with surprised groans, others with feral snarls. But for everyone I disarmed, another seemed to materialize from the shadows. Just as I thought I might prevail, the leader intervened. With a swift movement, he grabbed Sarah, his grip like a vice around her throat. "Enough!" he roared, his voice laced with a chilling power. "Lower your weapon, or the girl gets it." Despair threatened to engulf me. I was cornered, my only leverage a hostage in the hands of a monster. Slowly, I lowered the blade, the metallic clang a death knell to my meager hope. The leader's grin widened, revealing rows of sharpened teeth. "Excellent," he hissed. "Now, witness the true power of the weeping eye." He gestured towards the monstrous altar, and the ground began to tremble. From within the pulsating structure, a grotesque figure emerged, a writhing mass of shadows and bone. Its single, cyclopean eye, the same weeping symbol burned into the altar, locked onto Sarah with a malevolent hunger. "No!" I screamed, a primal plea that echoed into the void. But it was too late. The creature lunged, its shadowy tendrils engulfing Sarah in a suffocating embrace. Her screams, raw and desperate, were quickly snuffed out. A wave of nausea washed over me, the taste of bile rising in my throat. Grief, a monstrous entity in its own right, threatened to consume me. But amidst the crushing despair, a spark of something else ignited a cold, steely rage. They had taken everything from me, my friends, my life, and now, Sarah. But they had underestimated one thing: my capacity for vengeance. Picking up the discarded blade, I lunged towards the leader, a feral roar escaping my lips. My scream was a primal howl, a mixture of grief and a rage so white-hot it felt like it could melt the very stone beneath my feet. The leader, caught off guard by my sudden lunge, stumbled back. The grotesque creature, its tendrils still wrapped around Sarah's now lifeless form, let out a guttural shriek and whipped its shadowy mass towards me. I dodged the attack with a hair's breadth, the stench of decay and burning flesh assaulting my senses. Adrenaline masked the searing pain in my shoulder, the wound a constant reminder of the fight I'd just barely survived. But this wasn't about survival anymore. This was about making them pay. Gripping the discarded blade tighter, I charged towards the creature, a single, desperate thought echoing in my mind: destroy the altar. Sever their connection to whatever infernal power fueled this monstrosity. The creature met my charge with a fury born of the abyss. Its tendrils lashed out, barbed hooks tearing through my clothes and leaving bloody furrows on my skin. I ignored the pain, fueled by a righteous fury, and swung the blade with a ferocity that surprised even myself. The blade, surprisingly sharp, sliced through the shadowy tendrils with a sickening squelch. The creature recoiled, its single cyclopean eye burning with an unholy rage. Taking advantage of the opening, I lunged forward, aiming for the pulsating heart of the altar that seemed to be the source of its power. Just as the blade was about to connect, the leader, his face contorted in a mask of fury, slammed into me from the side. We crashed to the ground, a tangle of limbs and desperate grunts. He rained blows down on me, his strength surprising for his wiry frame. I blocked his attacks with the stolen blade, the metallic clang echoing through the clearing. He fought with the desperation of a cornered animal, but his movements lacked the finesse of his cloaked followers. With a surge of strength, I managed to overpower him, pinning him to the ground. The blade hovered over his throat, its tip reflecting the sickly green glow of the altar. "This ends now," I rasped, my voice hoarse with rage and exertion. The leader's eyes, devoid of fear, held a chilling amusement. "You think you've won, child? You've only unleashed a horror you can't even comprehend." He coughed, a wet, rattling sound. "The ritual, it's already complete." My blood ran cold. Complete? What did he mean? Before I could question him further, the ground began to tremble violently. The monstrous altar pulsed with an even more intense green light, the air crackling with raw, eldritch energy. A crack echoed through the clearing, splitting the earth wide open. From the abyss below, a monstrous entity clawed its way up. A writhing mass of tentacles and obsidian scales. Its form defied description, a nightmare given grotesque life. The leader cackled, a sound like fingernails scraping on a chalkboard. "Behold the true power of the weeping eye. You've brought about its arrival." Despair threatened to engulf me. This was beyond anything I could have imagined. I had failed. Everything I had done, all the lives lost, had only served to unleash an even greater evil upon the world. But amidst the despair, a flicker of defiance remained. They had taken everything from me, but they wouldn't take my will to fight. With a roar that surprised even myself, I lunged towards the monstrous entity, the stolen blade a pathetic weapon against such an opponent. The entity swatted me aside with a single tentacle, the force of the blow sending me flying through the air. I crashed against the pulsating altar, the impact stealing the breath from my lungs. As I lay there, my vision blurring, I saw the leader approach the entity, a crazed smile plastered on his face. He began chanting in a language that scraped against my sanity, his voice echoing through the clearing. Suddenly, the entity lurched forward, its massive form engulfing the leader in a crushing embrace. The leader's screams were cut short, replaced by a sickening crunch of bones. The entity then turned its single, malevolent eye towards me. A cold dread gripped me as I realized the horrifying truth. The ritual wasn't complete to summon the entity, it was to house it. The leader, in his twisted devotion, had offered himself as a vessel. The entity reared back, its maw agape, revealing rows of razor-sharp teeth. This was it, the end. But as I closed my eyes, accepting my fate, a voice, distorted and warped with static, crackled through the air. It wasn't coming from the monstrous entity or the clearing itself. It emanated from the failsafe box, the one Alex had entrusted to me. With a jolt, I remembered its cryptic inscription: a failsafe, a last resort. But against what? This entity seemed unstoppable. Desperation fueled a surge of defiance. Maybe, just maybe, this box held the key to a sliver of a chance. Ignoring the searing pain in my side, I fumbled for the box. My fingers slick with blood and sweat. As I pried it open, a blinding white light erupted from within, momentarily engulfing the clearing. The entity recoiled, its single eye flickering in confusion. The light subsided, revealing the box's contents, not a weapon, not a spell, but a single, flickering VHS tape. Confusion warred with desperation. A VHS tape? How could this be of any use? But before I could dwell on it further, the ground began to tremble with renewed intensity. Cracks snaked across the clearing, the air thick with an oppressive energy. The entity, seemingly revitalized by the failed offering of the leader, lunged towards me with a deafening roar. This time, there was no time for heroics. Scrambling to my feet, I tossed the VHS tape towards the pulsating altar, a desperate prayer forming in my mind. Let this work, please, let this work. The tape landed on the pulsating surface with a hiss. An unnatural silence descended upon the clearing, broken only by the ragged gasps of my own breath. Then, the impossible happened. The VHS tape began to play. A grainy, black and white image flickered to life on the altar's surface, depicting a group of figures, cloaked and masked, chanting around a crackling bonfire. The chanting was identical to the one the leader had used to summon the entity. But as I watched, the scene on the altar shifted. The chanting figures stumbled, their eyes widening in terror. A grotesque, shadowy form, vaguely familiar but far less imposing than the hulking monstrosity before me, began to materialize from the flames. Suddenly, the scene contorted, warping and twisting in on itself. A high-pitched whine filled the air, a sound that seemed to tear at the fabric of reality. Then, with a blinding flash of light, the image on the altar vanished. The clearing fell silent. The monstrous entity, its single eye flickering erratically, remained suspended in mid-air. Then, with a shriek that seemed to rip through the very soul, it began to dissolve. Its form shimmered and wavered, the grotesque tentacles and obsidian scales turning into wisps of dark smoke. Within seconds, the entity was gone, leaving behind only an eerie silence and the faint smell of burning sulfur. Disbelief washed over me, a cold wave that threatened to drown me. The VHS tape, it had somehow disrupted the ritual, banished the entity back to whatever infernal dimension it had crawled out of. But before I could celebrate, a wave of dizziness swept over me. The searing pain in my side flared anew, and the world began to spin. My legs buckled beneath me, and I sank to the blood-soaked ground. The failsafe box clattering beside me. As darkness began to claim the edges of my vision, a single thought echoed in my mind: I had survived. But for how long? The weeping eye was still out there, and the horrors it held, I feared, were far from over. Consciousness flickered back like a dying flame. The stench of blood and decay assaulted my nostrils, a grim reminder of the horrors I'd just barely survived. My body throbbed with a dull ache, every movement a testament to the punishment it had endured. I cracked open an eye, wincing at the harsh sunlight filtering through the jungle canopy. The monstrous altar, still pulsating with a faint green luminescence, dominated the clearing. The grotesque creature and its shadowy tendrils gone, only the sickening stain of their demise remained, a macabre reminder of the battle. But amidst the relief, a chilling realization settled in my gut. Sarah. My gaze darted around the clearing, searching for any sign of her. Nothing, only the silence, broken by the occasional chirp of an unseen bird, mocked my desperate hope. Tears welled up in my eyes, blurring my vision. She was gone, consumed by that monstrosity, another casualty in this digital nightmare. Grief, a suffocating weight, threatened to consume me. But then, a glint of metal caught my eye. Half buried in the blood-soaked ground lay the VHS tape, the failsafe that had somehow banished the entity. Anger, a white-hot ember, flared within me. A VHS tape? What kind of twisted joke was this? Scrambling to my feet, I snatched up the tape, its plastic shell slick with dried blood. The inscription on the box echoed in my mind: failsafe, a last resort. But against what? The answer, horrifyingly clear, now stared back at me from the grainy image on the tape. The figures in the black and white video weren't some ancient cult. They were Alex and his team, their faces etched with terror as they confronted a much smaller, less imposing version of the entity I'd faced. They'd used the tape, a recording of a previous failed summoning, to disrupt the ritual. But why a recording? And why hadn't Alex told me more? A horrifying suspicion began to take root. The weeping eye wasn't a singular entity. It was a contagion, a virus that spread through digital means. Growing stronger with each successful ritual. The sanctuary on Cipher Island wasn't a haven, it was a breeding ground. They were cultivating these entities, these monstrosities, for some yet unknown purpose. And I, the desperate fool, had played right into their hands. The weight of this realization nearly crushed me, but amidst the despair, a spark of defiance remained. I wouldn't let them win. Not after everything they'd taken. Gripping the VHS tape in my bloodied hand, I vowed to unravel their secrets. I would find a way to weaponize the failsafe, to turn their own rituals against them. This wasn't over, it was just the beginning. With a newfound resolve, I stumbled out of the clearing, the weight of the failsafe a constant reminder of the burden I now bore. The island jungle loomed before me, a tangled maze that held the key to my escape, and perhaps, the key to dismantling the horror that festered within. But as I ventured deeper into the dense foliage, a primal fear gnawed at the edges of my determination. The weeping eye might have been contained for now, but it was still out there, watching, waiting. And somewhere on this island, cloaked figures stirred, their plans for a new ritual already taking shape. The hunt had just begun. The island jungle was a symphony of suffocating green, a labyrinth of ancient trees and tangled undergrowth. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig, sent a jolt of adrenaline through my system. The failsafe box, clutched tight in my bloodied hand, felt less like a weapon and more like a cursed talisman. Days bled into nights, a relentless march through a humid, emerald hell. Hunger gnawed at my insides, a constant reminder of my precarious situation. Thirst was a constant adversary, forcing me to drink from stagnant puddles, the metallic tang a grim counterpoint to the fear that gnawed at me. Sleep, when it came, was a battlefield of nightmares. Sarah's screams echoed in the darkness. The grotesque image of the entity's maw snapping shut around her a horrifying tableau that stained my dreams. But amidst the terror, a cold, steely resolve had taken root. I wouldn't succumb to despair. Survival, for now, was the only weapon I had. I had to find a way out of this island prison, a way to expose the horrors that festered within. One day, as I stumbled through the dense undergrowth, the air grew thick with the stench of smoke and something far more unsettling, a metallic tang that sent shivers down my spine. Following the scent, I emerged into a clearing unlike any I'd seen before. In the center stood a makeshift laboratory, a grotesque fusion of scavenged metal and obsidian shards. Beasts, unlike anything I'd encountered on the island, roamed in cages hulking, mutated creatures with razor-sharp claws and eyes that glowed with an unnatural hunger. And amidst it all, cloaked figures, their faces obscured by grotesque masks, toiled over bubbling vats and strange contraptions that pulsed with an eerie green light. They were the architects of this nightmare, the cultists of the weeping eye. A primal rage surged through me, momentarily eclipsing the fear. They had taken everything from me. They had turned this island into a breeding ground for horrors. They deserved to pay. With a guttural roar, I charged out of the foliage, the failsafe box clutched in my hand. The cultists whirled around, surprise etched on their masked faces. But their surprise quickly turned to snarls and feral growls. The ensuing fight was a brutal ballet of desperation and violence. I lashed out with the failsafe box, its blunt edges connecting with bone with sickening thuds. The cultists fought back with a ferocity born of fanaticism, their barbed blades leaving bloody gashes across my body. The mutated beasts in the cages, sensing the commotion, began to thrash against their confines. One, a hulking monstrosity with razor-sharp claws, managed to break free. It roared a challenge, and in a blink of an eye, it was upon me. The fight devolved into a desperate struggle for survival. I dodged the beast's attacks, the stench of its rotting flesh assaulting my senses. Using the failsafe box as a makeshift shield, I managed to land a solid blow to its jaw, sending it reeling back momentarily. But the cultists pressed their attack, their movements fueled by a twisted zeal. Just as I felt myself tiring, a blood-curdling scream pierced the air. One of the beasts, freed from its cage in the chaos, had turned on its creators, its razor-sharp claws tearing through a cultist with sickening ease. The remaining cultists faltered, their fanaticism momentarily eclipsed by fear. They turned their blades on the rampaging beasts, a desperate struggle for dominance erupting within the laboratory. Taking advantage of the distraction, I scrambled towards the central contraption, the one that pulsed with the most intense green light. This, I knew, was the heart of their operation, the machine that fueled their rituals. With a surge of adrenaline, I smashed the failsafe box against the control panel. A shower of sparks erupted, followed by a deafening screech as the machine overloaded. The green light flickered and died, plunging the laboratory into darkness. Alarms blared, red emergency lights strobing through the chaos. The remaining cultists, their masked faces contorted with a mix of rage and fear, turned their attention back to me. But before they could attack, the ground began to tremble violently. The overload had triggered a chain reaction, and the makeshift laboratory was coming apart at the seams. With a roar, I scrambled towards the edge of the clearing, ignoring the searing pain in my side. Behind me, the laboratory erupted in a deafening explosion, a fireball engulfing the monstrous facility. The force of the blast sent me sprawling, the taste of dirt and blood filling my mouth. As I lay there, coughing and battered, a horrifying sight met my eyes. The explosion hadn't just leveled the laboratory, it had cracked the earth itself wide open. A chasm, dark and steaming, yawned before me, exuding a fetid stench that clawed at my throat. From the depths of the chasm, a sickly green light pulsed, casting an otherworldly glow on the ravaged clearing. A low, guttural moan echoed from below, a sound that sent shivers down my spine and made the hair on my arms stand on end. This wasn't the end, it was just the beginning. The cultists might be gone, but whatever lurked beneath the island's surface, awakened by the explosion, was far worse. Panic surged through me, a primal scream clawing its way up my throat. But then, amidst the terror, a flicker of morbid curiosity sparked. The failsafe box, it had disrupted the ritual before. Maybe, just maybe, it held the key to banishing this new horror as well. Scrambling to my feet, ignoring the throbbing pain in my body, I lunged towards the smoldering wreckage of the lab. The metallic tang of blood mingled with the acrid smoke, the scene a grotesque tableau of destruction. There, amidst the twisted metal and shattered glass, lay the mangled remains of the failsafe box. The VHS tape, miraculously intact, lay half buried in the debris. Grasping it in my bloodied hand, a sliver of hope, fragile as a spiderweb, flickered within me. But as I straightened, a horrifying realization slammed into me. The explosion had blocked the only path I knew back to the coast. I was trapped, stranded in the heart of the island with a monstrous entity awakening from its slumber below. Tears welled up in my eyes, a bitter cocktail of despair and defiance. But giving up wasn't an option. Sarah's memory, a burning ember in my gut, fueled a desperate resolve. Clutching the VHS tape, I turned and limped towards the dense jungle, the only path forward. The green glow from the chasm pulsed behind me, a malevolent beacon guiding me deeper into the island's heart. Ahead, the tangled foliage loomed like a monstrous maw, promising only darkness and uncertainty. But within that darkness, I clung to the hope that somewhere, somehow, there was a way to weaponize the failsafe, to turn this twisted technology against the horrors it had birthed. This island might be a prison, but I wouldn't be its captive. I would become its predator, hunting for answers, for a way to fight back against the encroaching darkness. The fight was far from over. In fact, it had just begun. And as I ventured deeper into the jungle, the monstrous moan from the chasm echoed behind me, a chilling reminder of the unspeakable evil that awaited. The jungle swallowed me whole. Sunlight, a distant memory, barely penetrated the dense canopy overhead. The air hung heavy with the cloying scent of decay and the incessant hum of unseen insects. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig, sent a jolt of adrenaline through my system. The mangled VHS tape, clutched tightly in my bloodied hand, offered a cold comfort. Could this grainy recording, a relic of a failed ritual, truly hold the key to defeating the monstrosity stirring beneath the island? Desperation gnawed at me, a relentless hunger that mirrored the emptiness in my stomach. Days bled into nights, a relentless march through a verdant labyrinth. Hunger gnawed at my insides, forcing me to scavenge for scraps, rotting fruit, insects I couldn't identify, anything to keep the fire of survival burning. Thirst was a constant adversary, driving me to drink from stagnant puddles, the metallic tang a grim counterpoint to the fear that gnawed at me. Sleep, when it came, was a battlefield of nightmares. Sarah's screams echoed in the darkness, a haunting melody intertwined with the grotesque image of the entity's maw snapping shut. But amidst the terror, a cold, steely resolve had solidified. One evening, as the jungle dimmed to an oppressive twilight, I stumbled upon a sight that sent a jolt of both hope and dread through me. A clearing, bathed in an unnatural, sickly green glow, dominated by a towering obsidian monolith. Carvings, depicting grotesque figures and symbols that mirrored the sigil of the weeping eye, snaked across its surface. This wasn't just any clearing, it was a place of power, a nexus for their dark rituals. And judging by the pulsating green light emanating from within the monolith, another ritual was underway. Fear threatened to consume me, but the memory of Sarah, the echo of her screams, fueled a desperate rage. I wouldn't let them win. Not again. With a primal snarl, I charged out of the foliage, the mangled VHS tape clutched in my hand like a twisted weapon. The cloaked figures, their faces obscured by grotesque masks, whirled around in surprise. But their surprise was short-lived, replaced by snarls and feral growls. This time, however, they weren't the only ones hungry for a fight. From the undergrowth surrounding the clearing, hulking, mutated creatures emerged, their razor-sharp claws glinting in the green light. The result was a nightmarish ballet of violence. I weaved through the chaos, the mangled VHS tape a poor excuse for a weapon. But desperation fueled my movements, and I managed to land a few solid blows, the metallic tang of blood a grim counterpoint to the creature's roars. One particularly large beast, its fur matted and its eyes glowing with an unnatural hunger, lunged at me. I dodged its attack at the last second, but the momentum sent me crashing into the base of the obsidian monolith. The impact knocked the wind out of me, stars exploding in my vision. As I lay there, gasping for breath, a horrifying realization dawned on me. The VHS tape, the only hope I had, lay just out of reach, crushed beneath the clawed foot of the monstrous beast that now loomed over me. A guttural growl ripped from its throat, and it raised its massive paw, its razor-sharp claws glinting in the green light. This was it, the end. Just as I squeezed my eyes shut, accepting my fate, a blood-curdling scream pierced the air. It wasn't mine, it was the scream of one of the cloaked figures. I opened my eyes a sliver to see a grotesque sight. The monstrous beast, its attention momentarily diverted, had turned on its creators. Razor-sharp claws ripped through flesh, spraying crimson across the clearing. The remaining cultists, their fanaticism momentarily eclipsed by fear, turned their blades on the rampaging beast. A desperate struggle ensued, a grotesque tableau of violence that momentarily overshadowed my own predicament. Seizing this opportunity, I lunged forward, ignoring the searing pain in my side. With a surge of adrenaline, I grabbed the mangled VHS tape, its plastic shell slick with blood and grime. Scrambling to my feet, I faced the remaining cultists, their eyes burning with a mix of rage and fear. But before they could attack, the ground began to tremble violently. The monolith, overloaded by the disrupted ritual, pulsed with an unnatural light before erupting in a blinding explosion. The force of the blast sent me flying through the air, the mangled VHS tape clattering from my grasp. I crashed against a tree, the impact momentarily stealing my breath. The world spun, a kaleidoscope of pain and disorientation. Groans escaped my lips, a wet rasp against the metallic tang of blood in my mouth. Tentatively, I stirred, the shattered remnants of the obsidian monolith casting grotesque shadows across the ravaged clearing. Silence, thick and heavy, hung in the air. The monstrous entity, awakened by the explosion, was nowhere to be seen. Had it fled back into the chasm from whence it came, or was it biding its time, waiting for a more opportune moment to strike? Panic clawed at my throat, but deeper still, a chilling realization settled in my gut. The VHS tape, my only hope, was gone. Lost amidst the debris of the shattered monolith, likely reduced to a mangled mess like the box that once housed it. Despair threatened to consume me, but a flicker of defiance sparked within. Giving up wasn't an option. Not yet. Sarah's memory, a burning ember in my chest, fueled a desperate resolve. I had to find a way out of this godforsaken island, to warn the world of the horrors that festered beneath its verdant surface. With a groan, I pushed myself upright, the world tilting precariously around me. Broken ribs protested with a searing pain, every breath a shallow gasp. Ignoring the agony, I scanned the ravaged clearing, searching for any sign of escape. Then, amidst the shattered stone and charred foliage, I saw it a narrow tunnel, barely visible at the base of a crumbling cliff face, partially obscured by fallen debris. Hope, a fragile thing, flickered to life within me. Could this be a way out? Scrambling towards the tunnel, ignoring the protests of my battered body, I found the entrance partially blocked by a large piece of obsidian. With a surge of adrenaline, I pushed against the heavy stone, dislodging it with a satisfying rumble. The tunnel gaped before me, a dark, inviting maw. The air emanating from it was cool and damp, carrying the faint scent of earth and something else. Something ancient and primal that sent shivers down my spine. But there was no time for hesitation. This was my only hope. Clutching the tattered remains of my shirt over my bloodied side, I crawled into the darkness, the tunnel swallowing me whole. The passage was narrow and oppressive, the air thick with the smell of damp earth and something far more unsettling, a metallic tang that sent a jolt of fear through me. The only light came from the faint green glow filtering in from the clearing behind me, slowly fading as I ventured deeper. Claustrophobia threatened to consume me as the walls pressed in, the silence broken only by the ragged rasp of my own breath. Each rustle, each scrape against the rough stone walls, sent a jolt of adrenaline through my system. But the deeper I ventured, the more the metallic tang in the air intensified. And then, a low, guttural growl echoed from somewhere ahead, a sound that crawled under my skin and made the hair on my arms stand on end. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the oppressive silence. The entity, or something monstrous birthed from the explosion, was down here, in this suffocating darkness. Panic threatened to overwhelm me, but the memory of Sarah, her face etched with fear, spurred me on. I had to keep moving. There had to be another way out of this tunnel, another way off this island. With a newfound determination, I quickened my pace, the darkness pressing in on me, the growl growing louder with every agonizing crawl. Suddenly, the tunnel opened up into a vast cavern, its ceiling lost in the inky blackness above. A sickly green glow emanated from the center, casting grotesque shadows across the uneven rock floor. And in the center, its form obscured by the green light, stood a creature unlike anything I had ever witnessed. It was massive, its silhouette vaguely humanoid but warped and twisted, its limbs impossibly long and ending in razor-sharp claws. Its eyes, glowing orbs of emerald fire, locked onto me. And a guttural growl, laced with a chilling intelligence, ripped from its throat. This was no mindless beast. This was the heart of the darkness, the true horror that the weeping eye had been cultivating. And I, a broken and bloodied man, was trapped in its lair. Terror threatened to consume me, but amidst the fear, a flicker of defiance remained. I wouldn't go down without a fight. Reaching into my pocket, with a desperate prayer, I grasped the only weapon I had left, the mangled remains of Captain Skull's compass. With a primal scream that echoed through the cavern, I charged towards the compass. Its needle spinning wildly in its shattered housing, felt pathetic against the monstrous entity looming before me. But it was all I had. With a primal scream that echoed through the cavern, a ragged echo of Sarah's own terror, I charged. The entity, its emerald eyes burning with malevolent hunger, reared back on its impossibly long legs. A wave of putrid stench, a cocktail of decay and something far more unnatural, assaulted my senses. It lashed out with a clawed hand, the blow aimed to crush me beneath its inhuman strength. I rolled to the side, the wind whistling past my ear as the razor-sharp claws tore a deep gouge into the cavern wall. Scrambling to my feet, I lunged forward again, the compass clutched tight in my bloodied hand. This wasn't about inflicting damage, it was about distraction, about creating an opening. I weaved through the cavern, the entity's enraged roars echoing off the rock walls. It was faster than I could have anticipated, its movements blurring as it tracked my every move. Just as a clawed hand reached for me, I slammed the compass against the entity's glowing eye. A shriek, a sound that seemed to tear at the fabric of reality itself, erupted from the creature. It recoiled, its emerald light flickering erratically. For a fleeting moment, I saw an opportunity. A pulsating orb of green light, nestled deep within the creature's chest cavity, pulsed with an unnatural rhythm. This, I realized with a jolt, was its heart, the source of its power. But before I could act on this newfound knowledge, the entity lashed out with a fury born of pain. A blow from its massive fist sent me sprawling across the cavern floor. Stars exploded in my vision, and a searing pain erupted in my chest. As I lay there, gasping for breath, the entity loomed over me, its emerald eyes burning with a renewed intensity. It raised its clawed hand for the final blow, its victory seemingly assured. Just then, a memory flickered in the recesses of my mind, Captain Skull's cryptic words about the compass. Pointed north, lad, and pray for a miracle. North, in this subterranean labyrinth? Desperate, I reached into my pocket and retrieved a shard of jagged obsidian, a leftover from the shattered monolith. With a surge of adrenaline, I used it to scratch a crude arrow pointing north on the cavern wall. Then, as the entity's claw descended towards me, I pointed the mangled compass at the makeshift arrow. A blinding white light erupted from the compass, momentarily engulfing the cavern. The entity shrieked, its form dissolving into wisps of dark smoke that converged on the glowing compass. The light intensified, the compass groaning in protest. For a horrifying moment, I thought it would shatter, unleashing whatever monstrosity the entity held within. But then, with a deafening crack, the light vanished. Silence descended upon the cavern, broken only by the ragged rasp of my own breathing. The entity was gone, seemingly sucked into the compass itself. Exhaustion overwhelmed me, and I slumped against the rock wall, the compass clattering from my grasp. Had I won, or had I simply created a new horror, a portable prison for the entity trapped within the compass? The answer, shrouded in darkness, offered little comfort. As darkness claimed the edges of my vision, a single thought echoed in my mind: escape. I had to get off this island, to warn the world of the horrors that festered beneath its surface. But with a broken body and a compass holding an unspeakable evil, the journey ahead seemed as perilous as the one I had just barely survived. Consciousness returned in waves, a nauseating ebb and flow that left me disoriented and adrift in a sea of pain. The cavern ceiling blurred above me, the events of the previous encounter playing on a loop behind my eyelids: the monstrous entity, the desperate gamble with the compass, the blinding white light. A cough racked my body, a symphony of pain erupting from my ribs. Tentatively, I reached up, wincing at the searing fire that lanced through my chest. My fingers brushed against a sticky warmth blood. A lot of it. Panic threatened to consume me, but a primal urge for survival clawed its way to the surface. I had to get out of this damned cavern. Escape. The thought echoed in my mind, a relentless drumbeat against the throbbing pain. With a groan that escaped my lips like a wounded animal's growl, I pushed myself upright. The world tilted precariously, the cavern floors a treacherous landscape beneath my unsteady legs. Ignoring the dizziness, I stumbled towards the tunnel entrance, the only path back to the ravaged clearing. The journey was an agonizing crawl, a testament to the human spirit's will to survive. Each labored breath sent fresh waves of pain crashing against me, and the darkness pressed in, a suffocating shroud threatening to steal the last vestiges of my sanity. But the memory of Sarah, her face etched with fear, fueled a desperate resolve. I wouldn't succumb, not yet. Every agonizing inch forward was a victory, a defiance against the horrors that lurked in the darkness. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, the faint green glow of the clearing spilled into the tunnel entrance. With a surge of adrenaline, I propelled myself forward, collapsing onto the damp earth in a heap of broken bones and shattered spirit. The clearing, once a battleground, was now an eerie tableau of destruction. The shattered monolith lay in pieces, the air thick with the acrid tang of burnt earth and something far more disturbing, a metallic tang that sent a shiver down my spine. And amidst the debris, half buried in the blood-soaked ground, lay the mangled compass. My gaze locked onto it, a sense of dread settling in my gut. Had the entity escaped, or was it still trapped within, a malevolent passenger waiting for the opportune moment to be unleashed? There was no time to dwell on the question. Survival, for now, was the only weapon I had. Ignoring the compass, I focused on the task at hand: escape. But as I scanned the ravaged clearing, a horrifying realization slammed into me. The explosion had triggered a landslide, blocking the narrow path back to the coast. I was trapped, a prisoner on an island teeming with horrors, both seen and unseen. Despair threatened to engulf me, but a flicker of defiance sparked within. Giving up wasn't an option. Sarah's memory, a burning ember in my chest, fueled a desperate resolve. I had to find another way out. The island jungle, once a menacing labyrinth, now offered the only glimmer of hope. With a deep breath, ignoring the searing pain in every fiber of my being, I pushed myself upright and limped towards the dense foliage, the mangled compass clutched tightly in my bloodied hand. The jungle swallowed me whole, its verdant embrace a twisted mockery of salvation. Each rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig, sent a jolt of adrenaline through my system. This wasn't just any jungle, it was a living, breathing entity, a predator in its own right. But I was a predator too, driven by a primal need for survival and a burning desire for revenge. The entity, the weeping eye, and the twisted cultists who worshipped it, they had taken everything from me. They would pay. Days bled into nights, a relentless march through a verdant hell. Hunger gnawed at my insides, forcing me to scavenge for scraps, rotting fruit, insects I couldn't identify, anything to keep the fire of survival burning. Thirst was a constant adversary, driving me to drink from stagnant puddles, the metallic tang a grim counterpoint to the rage that simmered within me. Sleep, when it came, was a battlefield of nightmares. Sarah's screams echoed in the darkness, a haunting melody intertwined with the grotesque image of the entity's maw snapping shut. But amidst the terror, a cold, steely resolve solidified. One day, as the jungle canopy dimmed to an oppressive twilight, I stumbled upon a sight that sent a jolt of both hope and dread through me. A clearing, bathed in an unnatural, sickly green glow, pulsated with an otherworldly energy. In the center stood a towering, gnarled tree, its branches twisting and reaching skyward like skeletal fingers clawing at the heavens. This wasn't just any tree, it was an anomaly, a pulsating beacon of dark energy that resonated with a power that sent shivers down my spine. And hanging from its gnarled branches, like grotesque fruit, were cocoons pulsing, writhing masses of obsidian flesh that pulsed with a faint green light. A horrifying realization slammed into me. This wasn't just a breeding ground for the monstrous entities, it was a hatchery. The Weeping Eye wasn't content with creating monstrosities on the island. They were preparing to unleash them upon the world. Rage, a white-hot inferno, erupted within me, momentarily eclipsing the searing pain in my side. They would pay. Every life they had taken, every soul they had corrupted, would be repaid in blood. With a feral snarl, I charged out of the foliage, the mangled compass clutched tightly in my bloodied hand. The unnatural light from the tree cast grotesque shadows across the clearing, and a low, pulsating hum filled the air, a sound that vibrated through my bones. But before I could reach the tree, figures emerged from the shadows, their faces obscured by grotesque masks that mirrored the sigil of the Weeping Eye. This time, however, they weren't cloaked figures, they were hulking, mutated monstrosities, their bodies a grotesque fusion of man and beast. The ensuing fight was a brutal ballet of desperation and violence. I lunged at the nearest monstrosity, the compass a poor excuse for a weapon. But fueled by a primal rage, I managed to land a solid blow to its jaw, the sickening crack of bone echoing through the clearing. The creature roared in pain, but it pressed its attack, razor-sharp claws tearing through my flesh. The other monstrosities joined the fray, a cacophony of growls and snarls filling the air. The clearing became a whirlwind of blood and viscera, a testament to the depravity that festered at the heart of the Weeping Eye. Just as I felt myself tiring, a blood-curdling scream pierced the air. One of the cultists, caught off guard by a particularly savage blow from the monstrosity it had created, was being ripped limb from limb. The other cultists faltered, their fanaticism momentarily eclipsed by a primal fear. Seizing this opportunity, I lunged towards the pulsating tree, ignoring the searing pain that threatened to consume me. With a desperate surge of adrenaline, I slammed the mangled compass against the gnarled bark. A blinding white light erupted, engulfing the clearing. The cocoons writhed and pulsed, the green light within them flickering erratically. The monstrosities shrieked in a chorus of pain, their bodies dissolving into wisps of dark smoke. The light intensified, the compass groaning in protest. For a horrifying moment, I thought it would shatter, releasing whatever monstrosity the entity held within. But then, with a deafening crack that echoed through the jungle, the light vanished, silence descended upon the clearing, broken only by the ragged rasp of my own breathing. The tree stood defiant, the cocoons now lifeless husks, their green glow extinguished. The monstrosities were gone, seemingly sucked into the compass itself, joining the entity in its metallic prison. Exhaustion washed over me, a tidal wave threatening to pull me under. I slumped against the gnarled trunk of the tree, the compass clattering from my grasp. Had I won, or had I simply created a new horror, a portable prison for two unspeakable evils trapped within the compass? The answer, shrouded in darkness, offered little comfort. But as darkness claimed the edges of my vision, a single thought flickered in my mind: escape. This island, once a prison, now held a far greater threat. I had to get back to the mainland, to warn the world of the horrors that lurked not just beneath the surface of the island, but now, potentially, within the compass itself. The journey ahead seemed as perilous as the one I had just barely survived. But with a broken body and a cursed compass, I had no choice but to press on. The fight was far from over. In fact, it had just begun. The jungle mocked my escape attempt. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig, sent a jolt of terror through me. The mangled compass, clutched precariously in my bloodied hand, felt more like a ticking time bomb than a weapon. The metallic tang of blood, a constant companion, mingled with the humid air, a grim reminder of the brutal fight I'd barely survived. Days bled into nights, a relentless march through a verdant labyrinth. Hunger gnawed at my insides, a relentless enemy. I forced myself to swallow decaying fruit, its sweetness spoiled by a metallic aftertaste. Thirst was a constant adversary, driving me to drink from stagnant puddles, the water thick with a film that sent shivers down my spine. Sleep, when it came, was a battlefield of nightmares. Sarah's screams echoed in the darkness, a haunting melody intertwined with the grotesque image of the entity's maw snapping shut. But amidst the terror, a cold, steely resolve had solidified. I wouldn't give up, not while that compass, pulsating with a faint green light in my pocket, threatened to unleash a new wave of horrors upon the world. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long, grotesque shadows across the jungle floor, I stumbled upon a sight that sent a flicker of hope through the despair. A clearing, bathed in the dying sunlight, revealed a rickety wooden shack nestled precariously amongst the trees. Smoke curled from a chimney, a fragile wisp of defiance against the encroaching darkness. Hope, a fragile thing, flickered to life within me. Perhaps this shack housed someone, a hermit or a castaway, who could offer aid or point me towards a way off this cursed island. With a surge of adrenaline, I ignored the searing pain in my side and limped towards the shack. As I drew closer, a sense of unease settled in my gut. The silence was unnatural, broken only by the rhythmic creak of a rocking chair on the porch. A figure, shrouded in shadow, sat on the porch, its back turned to me. "Hello?" I croaked, my voice hoarse from disuse. The figure remained motionless, the rocking chair creaking ominously. A shiver danced down my spine. Something felt wrong, deeply wrong. Tentatively, I stepped onto the porch, the warped floorboards groaning in protest. "Is anyone there?" I repeated, my voice barely a whisper. The figure on the rocking chair slowly turned its head, revealing a face etched with wrinkles and age. But it wasn't the face's age that sent a jolt of terror through me, it was the eyes. They were milky white, devoid of pupils, and burned with an unnatural light that mirrored the green glow of the compass. A thin, reptilian smile stretched across the face, revealing rows of needle-sharp teeth. Finally, the figure rasped, its voice a dry whisper that sent shivers down my spine. "You've come." The compass it called to you. Panic threatened to consume me, but the memory of Sarah, her face etched with fear, spurred me on. "Who are you?" I stammered, clutching the compass tighter in my bloodied hand. The figure chuckled, a dry, rasping sound that echoed through the clearing. "A friend," it hissed. "Someone who understands the true power of the weeping eye. Someone who can help you unleash it." Before I could react, the figure lunged. Its gnarled fingers, impossibly long and tipped with razor-sharp claws, reached for the compass. A primal scream ripped from my throat as I instinctively shoved him back. The struggle that ensued was a brutal ballet of desperation and violence. The figure, surprisingly strong for its age, fought with a ferocity born of madness. Its claws raked across my flesh, leaving deep, bloody gashes. But fueled by rage and a desperate need to survive, I fought back. Using the compass as a makeshift weapon, I slammed it against the figure's head. A sickening crack echoed through the clearing, and the figure stumbled back, momentarily stunned. Seizing this opportunity, I lunged forward and slammed the shack door shut, throwing my weight against it. The frail wood splintered under my assault, but it bought me a precious moment. Desperate for an escape, I scanned the shack interior. My eyes landed on a rusty cleaver hanging on a peg by the fireplace. With a surge of adrenaline, I snatched it up, the cold metal a welcome comfort in my trembling hand. As I turned back towards the door, a sickening crack echoed from behind it. The figure had breached the flimsy barrier, its milky white eyes burning with an unholy hunger. Its wizened frame seemed to bulge with unnatural power, the shadows around it writhing like living things. Fear, cold and metallic, flooded my veins, but it was quickly eclipsed by a primal rage. This twisted creature wouldn't take the compass, wouldn't unleash the horrors it held. Not over my dead body. With a guttural roar, I charged. The cleaver felt heavy in my hand, every movement a searing reminder of the broken ribs beneath my ragged breasts. The figure met my charge with surprising agility, its claws flashing in the dim light filtering through the shattered window. The ensuing fight was a whirlwind of blood and viscera. I swung the cleaver wildly, the rusty metal singing a deadly song as it carved deep gashes into the creature's flesh. It shrieked in pain, a sound that seemed to tear at the fabric of reality itself. But it pressed its attack, its razor-sharp claws tearing through my clothes and leaving bloody furrows across my skin. The stench of iron and decay filled the shack, a grim counterpoint to the creature's raspy gasps and my own ragged breaths. We grappled, a twisted dance of desperation, the floorboards groaning under our weight. Just as I felt myself tiring, the creature lunged, its claws aimed for my throat. In a desperate maneuver, I brought the cleaver down with all my remaining strength. Aiming for its arm, the metal bit deep, severing the creature's limb at the elbow in a spray of gore. It shrieked in a fury that shook the shack, but the momentary distraction was all I needed. With a surge of adrenaline, I shoved the creature back, sending it crashing into the rickety table. The table splintered under its weight, sending a cascade of plates and cutlery clattering to the floor. But before I could capitalize on my advantage, the creature lunged again, its remaining claw aimed for my chest. I twisted at the last second, the razor-sharp claw tearing through the flesh of my shoulder instead. A scream ripped from my throat, a primal howl of pain and defiance. Ignoring the searing agony, I brought the cleaver down one final time, aiming for the creature's head. The metal connected with a sickening thud, splitting its skull open in a spray of bone and gore. The creature twitched once, its milky white eyes dimming, before collapsing onto the floor in a heap of lifeless flesh. Silence descended upon the shack, broken only by my ragged gasps. Exhaustion washed over me, a tidal wave threatening to pull me under. I slumped against the wall, the cleaver clattering to the floor with a heavy thud. The compass, knocked from my grasp during the struggle, lay on the floor a few feet away. Its faint green glow pulsed erratically, as if mocking my victory. Had I truly won, or had I simply delayed the inevitable? The metallic tang of blood filled my mouth, a grim reminder of the brutal fight. I knew, with a chilling certainty, that this was just the beginning. The horrors of the island, the entity trapped within the compass, the secrets whispered by the creature in its final moments, they wouldn't stay buried forever. With a deep breath, I ignored the searing pain in my body and pushed myself to my feet. There was no time to rest, no time to mourn. I had to get off this island, to warn the world of the darkness that festered beneath its surface, and the even greater horror that now resided within the compass I clutched tightly in my bloodied hand. The journey ahead seemed an insurmountable task, but I wouldn't give up. Sarah's memory, a burning ember in my chest, fueled a desperate resolve. The fight for survival, for vengeance, had just begun. And this time, the stakes were higher than ever before. The creature writhed in agony, thrashing against its chains. Its struggles chipped away at the iron shackles with a sickening screech of metal on metal. With a final, earth-shattering roar, the beast tore free, its maddened gaze fixated on me, the tiny figure who dared to defy it. Panic threatened to consume me, but the memory of Sarah, a flickering ember in my chest, fueled a desperate resolve. This monstrosity, born from the weeping eye's unholy womb, wouldn't claim another victim. Not tonight. Adrenaline surged through my battered body, momentarily dulling the searing pain. I lunged towards the pulsating monolith, the compass clutched tightly in my bloodied hand. The faint green light seemed to throb faster, a beacon in the growing darkness. The creature roared in fury and charge, its massive form blurred across the clearing, the ground trembling with each thunderous step. I scrambled up the side of the monolith, the rough-hewn stone scraping against my raw flesh. Halfway up, I reached a narrow ledge, barely wide enough to hold my weight. The beast reached the base of the monolith, its frustrated roars echoing through the clearing. It clawed at the smooth stone surface, its razor-sharp talons finding no purchase. But its relentless assault shook the very foundation of the monolith, sending tremors through my already precarious perch. With a desperate heave, I pulled myself onto the ledge, gasping for breath. Below, the creature reared back, its enraged howls splitting the night. It lunged, its massive jaws snapping at me, missing by a hair's breadth. A horrifying thought struck me. The monolith, it wasn't just a monument, it was a conduit, a channel for the weeping eye's unholy power. And with each desperate swipe of the creature's claws, the green glow intensified. Pulsating with a malevolent energy, I knew what I had to do. A chilling certainty settled in my gut, a desperate gamble against oblivion. With a deep breath, I raised the compass high above my head, the faint green light casting an eerie glow on my face. The creature froze, its primal instincts sensing the power emanating from the compass. A low growl rumbled from its throat, a sound filled with equal parts fear and hunger. "Take it," I rasped, my voice hoarse from exertion. "Take it all." The compass pulsed erratically, as if responding to my command. The green light intensified, bathing the clearing in an unnatural glow. The creature, mesmerized, took a tentative step towards me. Then, with a deafening crack that echoed through the jungle, the compass shattered. A blinding white light erupted, engulfing the clearing, the creature, and the pulsating monolith. For a horrifying moment, the world went silent, the only sound the pounding of my own terrified heart. When the light receded, a chilling silence descended. The creature was gone, vanished without a trace. The monolith stood dark and inert, its pulsating green glow extinguished. But the air crackled with a residual energy, a sense of unease that settled in my bones like ice. Had I destroyed the entity trapped within the compass? Or had I simply released it, fragmented and enraged, upon the world? The answer, shrouded in darkness, offered little comfort. Exhaustion, a tidal wave threatening to pull me under, crashed over me. I slumped against the rough stone of the ledge, the shattered remains of the compass falling into the abyss below. My body ached with every breath, a symphony of broken bones and throbbing muscles. But amidst the pain, a flicker of hope remained. I had escaped the island, or at least this part of it. The rickety boat, a distant memory, beckoned with the promise of escape. With a deep breath, ignoring the searing agony, I pushed myself to my feet. The journey ahead was uncertain, the future shrouded in a dense fog of fear and uncertainty. But one thing was clear, the fight for survival, for vengeance, had just begun. And this time, the stakes were higher than ever before. The weeping eye, or whatever remained of it, wouldn't rest. And neither would I. The descent from the monolith was a harrowing ordeal. Every handhold sent fresh jolts of pain through my already battered body. My vision swam with exhaustion, the jungle floor below a dizzying blur. But the memory of the creature's feral hunger, the chilling possibility of the weeping eye unleashed, spurred me onward. Reaching the jungle floor, I landed in a crumpled heap, the breath momentarily knocked out of me. Gasping for air, I surveyed the clearing. The pulsating monolith stood defiant, a silent sentinel, but the unnatural green glow was gone, replaced by an oppressive darkness. A primal fear gnawed at the edges of my mind. Had I destroyed the entity? Or had I simply fragmented it, scattering its essence like a malevolent wind across the island, perhaps the world? The horrifying answer remained a mystery, a chilling weight that settled in my gut like a venomous stone. Pushing myself upright, I ignored the searing pain that flared in every muscle. The rickety boat, a fragile hope amidst the encroaching darkness, beckoned from the distant shore. With a determined limp, I began the final leg of my escape. The journey through the jungle was a blur of pain and primal fear. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig, sent a jolt of terror through me. The fractured remains of the compass, a constant reminder of my desperate gamble, were clutched tightly in my bloodied hand. Days bled into nights, a relentless march towards the sliver of hope on the horizon. Hunger gnawed at my insides, a relentless enemy. I forced myself to swallow decaying fruit, its sweetness spoiled by a metallic tang that sent shivers down my spine. Thirst was a constant adversary, driving me to drink from stagnant puddles, the water thick with a film that sent shivers down my spine. Sleep, when it came, was a battlefield of nightmares. Sarah's screams echoed in the darkness, a haunting melody intertwined with the grotesque image of the creature's maddened gaze. But amidst the terror, a cold, steely resolve had solidified. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, I stumbled out of the dense foliage and onto the sandy beach. The rickety boat, battered by the elements but seemingly seaworthy, bobbed gently in the waves. A surge of relief, so powerful it almost brought me to my knees, washed over me. But as I approached the boat, a sickening sight sent a fresh wave of terror crashing against my fragile hope. Half buried in the sand, lay the mangled corpse of a fisherman. His face contorted in a mask of unspeakable horror. His torn clothes revealed deep gashes, wounds inflicted by something with razor-sharp claws. Panic threatened to consume me, but the memory of Sarah, her face etched with fear, spurred me on. This island, once a potential prison, now held a far greater threat: the fragmented essence of the Weeping Eye, a malevolent force seeking a new host, a new way to unleash its unholy power upon the world. With a trembling hand, I pushed the lifeless body aside and clambered into the boat. Ignoring the searing pain, I grabbed a broken oar and began to row, my strokes fueled by a desperate need to escape this cursed place. As I pulled away from the shore, I glanced back at the island, a dark silhouette against the blood-red horizon. A single, sickly green light flickered atop the monolith, a malevolent eye staring out at me, a chilling promise of the horrors to come. I knew, with a chilling certainty, that this wasn't over. The fight for survival, for vengeance, had just entered a new phase. The fragmented essence of the Weeping Eye was out there, and I, a broken man with a shattered compass and a heart filled with rage, was all that stood between it and the world. The journey ahead was uncertain, the stakes higher than ever before. But one thing was clear: I wouldn't rest until the Weeping Eye was truly vanquished, its unholy essence scattered to the winds. And if that meant becoming a monster myself, to fight fire with fire, then so be it. The island may have broken me, but it wouldn't break my will to survive. The fight had just begun. Days bled into a gruesome tapestry of survival. The rickety boat, christened the Carrion, in a moment of dark humor, became my prison and my only hope. The fractured remains of the compass, pulsating with a faint, erratic green light, were a constant reminder of my gamble, a gamble that might have unleashed a horror far worse than I could have imagined. Hunger gnawed at my insides, a relentless enemy. Fish, scavenged raw from the churning sea, tasted metallic and left my stomach churning. Dehydration clawed at my throat, forcing me to drink rainwater collected in a tattered sailcloth. The sky, a canvas of bruised purples and oranges, offered scant comfort. Sleep, when it came, was a battlefield of nightmares. Sarah's screams mingled with grotesque visions of the creature on the island, its form shifting and morphing, its eyes glowing with an unholy hunger. But amidst the terror, a cold, steely resolve had solidified. I wouldn't succumb, not while the fragmented essence of the Weeping Eye, a malevolent force seeking a new host, festered somewhere out there. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of blood and ash, a plume of smoke rose from the distant water. Hope, a fragile thing, flickered in my chest. Another boat, rescue, or perhaps something far worse. With a surge of adrenaline, I ignored the searing pain in my muscles and rowed towards the smoke, the fractured compass clutched in my bloodied hand. As I drew closer, a sickening stench filled the air, a cocktail of decay and something far more disturbing, a metallic tang that sent shivers down my spine. The source of the smoke came into view: a rusted freighter, its hull half submerged, listing drunkenly in the waves. Smoke billowed from a gaping hole in its side, a grotesque wound inflicted by something unnatural. A primal fear gnawed at me, but the memory of Sarah, her face etched with fear, propelled me forward. This ship, a potential tomb or a beacon of hope, held the answer. I had to find out. Clambering aboard the listing vessel was an exercise in controlled fear. The rusted deck creaked ominously under my weight, the smell of decay thick in the air. Silence, broken only by the groaning of the ship and the rhythmic crash of waves against the hull, pressed down on me like a physical weight. Following a trail of bloodstains, I found myself in the ship's galley. The scene that greeted me was a tableau of carnage. Mangled bodies, their flesh torn and ripped, lay strewn across the floor. Empty eye sockets stared accusingly at the ceiling, a chilling testament to the brutality that had unfolded here. In the center of the carnage, a single figure stood hunched over. Its back was to me, but its silhouette was unmistakable, the creature from the island, its form seemingly unchanged. But a single, pulsing green light emanating from its chest, where its heart should have been, revealed a horrifying truth. The fragmented essence of the weeping eye, it seemed, had found a new host. And this time, it was stronger, more monstrous than before. A primal scream ripped from my throat, a challenge and a warning. The creature whirled around, its feral eyes glowing with unholy hunger. Its razor-sharp claws glinted in the dim light, a promise of a brutal and agonizing death. The fight that ensued was a whirlwind of violence and primal rage. I lunged forward, the fractured remains of the compass clutched tightly in my bloodied hand. The creature met my charge with a roar, its claws a blur as it swiped at me. I dodged narrowly, the wind whistling past my ear. The freighter's listing deck became our battleground, the rusted metal groaning under our combined weight. I used the precarious environment to my advantage, dodging around crates and barrels, the creature's frustrated roars echoing through the ship. But the creature, fueled by the entity's unholy power, was far stronger and faster than before. A blow from its massive paw sent me crashing into a bulkhead, the impact stealing the breath from my lungs. Stars exploded in my vision, and the world tilted precariously as I lay there, gasping for air. The creature loomed over me, its fetid breath washing over my face. Its razor-sharp claws twitched, a promise of a quick and brutal end. Just as I closed my eyes, accepting my fate, a horrifying realization slammed into me. The compass, the shattered remains, clutched tightly in my hand, pulsed with a faint, erratic green light. A desperate gamble, a last-ditch effort, flickered to life in my mind. With a surge of adrenaline that momentarily overpowered the searing pain in my ribs, I lunged forward, shoving the fractured remains of the compass into the creature's pulsating green chest wound. The creature recoiled with a shriek that tore through the steel hull of the ship. A grotesque light show erupted, the green glow of the entity clashing with the faint, erratic pulse of the compass. Sparks flew, the air crackled with unholy energy, and the creature thrashed in agony. My vision swam, the metallic tang of blood filling my mouth. But I held on, gripping the compass shard with the last vestiges of my strength, forcing it deeper into the wound. The creature's shrieks morphed into a blood-curdling roar, a sound that seemed to vibrate through my very bones. The freighter groaned in protest, the listing deck tilting further as unseen forces tore at its rusted innards. With a final, earth-shattering screech, the creature convulsed, its monstrous form contorting and warping. Then, in a blinding flash of white light that momentarily stole my sight, the creature exploded in a shower of gore and bone. The force of the explosion sent me flying across the galley, slamming into the far wall. The world spun, a kaleidoscope of pain and disorientation. As my vision cleared, I saw only a gaping hole in the creature's chest, the green light extinguished, replaced by a sickly yellow glow emanating from the mangled mess of flesh and bone. A wave of nausea washed over me, the stench of burnt flesh and otherworldly ichor overwhelming. But amidst the horror, a sliver of hope flickered. The entity, or whatever remained of it, seemed contained. For now, with a burst of adrenaline, I scrambled towards the deck, the fractured remains of the compass clutched tightly in my hand. Reaching the deck, I found myself staring at a scene of utter devastation. The freighter was splitting in two, the rusted hull groaning in protest as the hungry sea claimed its prize. No time for theatrics. Spotting a lone life raft tethered precariously to the tilting deck, I lunged for it. With a final groan, the freighter split in two, the stern section plunging into the churning sea. The life raft, caught in the current, was swept away from the wreckage. As I clung to the flimsy raft, the immensity of my situation crashed down on me. Alone, adrift in a vast ocean, with a compass shard that pulsed with an unsettling green light, a grim reminder of the horrors I'd faced and the even greater ones that might lie ahead. The rising sun painted the sky in hues of orange and pink, a cruel mockery of my situation. The vast expanse of the ocean stretched before me, an endless horizon offering no solace. Was the entity truly vanquished, or simply biding its time? And what about the island, the source of all this horror? Did it still hold secrets, waiting to be unleashed upon the world? The questions swirled in my mind, a storm with no answers. But amidst the uncertainty, a single, unwavering resolve remained. I wouldn't succumb, I would survive, and I would find a way to ensure the entity, in whatever form it now existed, remained trapped. The fight for survival, for vengeance, had taken on a new form. This time, the battleground was the endless ocean, and the stakes were the fate of the world. As I drifted towards the uncertain horizon, the fractured compass shard clutched tightly in my hand. I knew this was just the beginning. Days bled into a relentless blur of sun-scorched skin, parched throat, and gnawing hunger. The flimsy life raft, a sickening yellow against the endless blue canvas of the ocean, became my prison and my precarious perch. The fractured compass shard, a constant reminder of the horrors I'd faced, pulsed with an erratic green light that seemed to mock my dwindling hope. The vast expanse of the ocean offered no solace, only the ever-present threat of dehydration and starvation. Fish, raw and barely palatable, became my only source of sustenance. Seagulls, drawn by the scent of my desperation, swooped down, their beady eyes gleaming with a predatory hunger. Sleep, when it came, was a battlefield of fragmented nightmares, Sarah's screams echoing alongside the grotesque image of the freighter's mangled form, the creature's final, earth-shattering screech, a constant reminder of the entity's potential return. One evening, as the fiery sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in a bruised palette of purples and oranges, a flicker of movement on the horizon sent a jolt of adrenaline through my parched body. A ship? Rescue? Or perhaps something far more sinister? With a surge of desperate hope, I squinted through the salty spray, the fractured compass shard clutched tightly in my bloodied hand. As the vessel drew closer, a sickening feeling settled in my gut. It wasn't a rescue ship, but a dilapidated fishing trawler, its hull encrusted with barnacles and its paint peeling in grotesque flakes. A single, ragged flag bearing an unfamiliar symbol fluttered from the mast, a chilling premonition of what was to come. The trawler pulled alongside the life raft, its engine sputtering and coughing like a consumptive man. A wizened figure, his face etched with a lifetime spent battling the unforgiving sea, leaned over the railing. His eyes, cold and calculating, glinted with a predatory hunger that mirrored the gulls that circled overhead. "Lost, are ye?" he rasped, his voice like sandpaper on bone. "Looks like ye could use a hand." Despite the gnawing suspicion in my gut, the promise of food, water, and a chance to escape the relentless ocean was too tempting to ignore. With a deep breath, I nodded, the movement sending fresh waves of pain through my battered body. The weathered rope ladder dangling from the trawler's side seemed to stretch for an eternity as I hauled myself aboard. The stench of rotting fish and something far more disturbing, a metallic tang that sent shivers down my spine, filled the air. The wizened captain, his name revealed in a guttural growl to be Jedediah, surveyed me with a predatory glint in his eyes. "Been at sea a while, haven't ye?" he remarked, his gaze lingering on the fractured compass shard clutched in my hand. I mumbled a noncommittal response, my throat parched and raw. Jedediah barked a laugh, a sound devoid of humor, and gestured towards a hatch leading below deck. "Get yourself cleaned up, lad. We could use an extra hand." The cramped hold reeked of decay and something far more unsettling, a dark, swirling energy that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. Several cages, constructed of rusty iron bars, lined the walls. Inside each cage, a gaunt figure huddled in the darkness, their eyes glowing with a faint, unsettling green light. A primal scream ripped from my throat, a strangled cry of recognition and horror. These weren't men, they were husks, their bodies possessed by fragments of the weeping eye, the entity I thought I'd destroyed. Jedediah chuckled, a dry rasp that echoed through the fetid hold. "Oh, you recognize our cargo, do ye?" He slammed a rusted cleaver onto a nearby table, the metallic clang sending a jolt of fear through me. "Don't worry, lad, there's always room for one more. Lost, are ye?" he rasped, his voice like sandpaper on bone. "Looks like ye could use a hand." Despite the gnawing suspicion in my gut, the promise of food, water, and a chance to escape the relentless ocean was too tempting to ignore. With a deep breath, I nodded, the movement sending fresh waves of pain through my battered body. The weathered rope ladder dangling from the trawler's side seemed to stretch for an eternity as I hauled myself aboard. The stench of rotting fish and something far more disturbing, a metallic tang that sent shivers down my spine, filled the air. The wizened captain, his name revealed in a guttural growl to be Jedediah, surveyed me with a predatory glint in his eyes. "Been at sea a while, haven't ye?" he remarked, his gaze lingering on the fractured compass shard clutched in my hand. I mumbled a noncommittal response, my throat parched and raw. Jedediah barked a laugh, a sound devoid of humor, and gestured towards a hatch leading below deck. "Get yourself cleaned up, lad. We could use an extra hand." The cramped hold reeked of decay and something far more unsettling, a dark, swirling energy that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. Several cages, constructed of rusty iron bars, lined the walls. Inside each cage, a gaunt figure huddled in the darkness, their eyes glowing with a faint, unsettling green light. A primal scream ripped from my throat, a strangled cry of recognition and horror. These weren't men, they were husks, their bodies possessed by fragments of the weeping eye, the entity I thought I'd destroyed. Jedediah chuckled, a dry rasp that echoed through the fetid hold. "Oh, you recognize our cargo, do ye?" He slammed a rusted cleaver onto a nearby table, the metallic clang sending a jolt of fear through me. "Don't worry, lad, there's always room for one more." Panic threatened to consume me, but the memory of Sarah, her face etched with fear, spurred me on. I wouldn't become another empty vessel for the entity's malevolent power. Not without a fight. A desperate plan, fueled by a cocktail of rage and fear, erupted in my mind. With a surge of adrenaline, I lunged for the fractured compass shard, its green light pulsing erratically. As Jedediah lunged forward, his cleaver raised high, I slammed the shard into the deck, the green light intensifying into a blinding flash. The hold erupted in chaos. The possessed figures in the cages thrashed against the bars, their green eyes glowing with a renewed hunger. Jedediah roared in fury, the cleaver slipping from his grasp as the blinding green light engulfed the hold. The possessed figures within the cages contorted, their inhuman screams a cacophony of pain and rage. The very air crackled with a malevolent energy, the fractured compass shard at the center of the storm, pulsing erratically like a beating heart. In the ensuing chaos, I scrambled for a weapon. My gaze fell on the cleaver, lying abandoned on the grimy deck. Blood slick and heavy in my hand, I lunged towards Jedediah, the promise of vengeance fueling my every move. He met my charge with surprising agility, his weathered face contorted in a mask of rage. A brutal fight ensued, a pirouette of desperation and violence in the cramped confines of the hold. The possessed figures thrashed against their cages, their screams a maddening counterpoint to the clash of steel and bone. Jedediah swung wildly, his blows fueled by a dark power. I parried his attacks with the cleaver, the rusted metal groaning under the strain. A blow from his fist connected with my jaw, sending a searing pain through my skull. Blood streamed down my face, blurring my vision, but the memory of Sarah, her terrified pleas echoing in my mind, kept me fighting. With a desperate lunge, I managed to land a glancing blow on Jebediah's arm. A shriek of pain ripped from his throat as he stumbled back, clutching his wound. Seizing the opportunity, I brought the cleaver down in a vicious arc, aiming for his head. The blade connected with a sickening thud, splitting his skull open in a spray of gore and bone. Jebediah crumpled to the floor, his lifeless eyes staring vacantly at the pulsating compass shard. Silence descended upon the hold, broken only by the ragged gasps of my own breath and the demented howls of the possessed figures. But the victory was short-lived. The green light emanating from the compass shard intensified, swirling and coiling like a living serpent. The iron bars of the cages began to glow with an unholy light, warping and twisting under the entity's malevolent influence. With a deafening crack, one of the cages burst open. A hulking figure, its body contorted and grotesque, emerged from the wreckage. Its eyes, glowing with an unholy green light, fixated on me, a predator sizing up its prey. Panic surged through me, a primal fear that threatened to consume me. But amidst the terror, a cold, steely resolve solidified. I wouldn't let this entity escape, not after all I'd lost. Grabbing the cleaver, its grip slick with blood and sweat, I charged towards the creature. The other cages erupted, disgorging a horde of possessed figures, their inhuman shrieks drowning out the world. The fight that ensued was a brutal ballet of desperation and violence. I dodged razor-sharp claws and gnashing teeth, the stench of decay and rotting flesh filling my nostrils. The cleaver, a grim reaper's scythe, carved a bloody swath through the possessed, each blow fueled by a desperate need to survive. But the possessed were relentless, their numbers overwhelming. One by one, they fell beneath my blade, but for each one that fell, two more seemed to take its place. Exhaustion clawed at me, my muscles screaming in protest. Blood streamed down my wounds, painting the grimy deck crimson. Just as I felt myself falter, a horrifying realization slammed into me. The fractured compass shard, pulsating with an ever-increasing intensity, was the source of their power. If I destroyed it, I could sever the entity's hold on them. But at what cost? With a ragged breath, I made my choice. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about stopping the entity at all costs. Raising the cleaver high above my head, I brought it crashing down on the pulsating compass shard. The world erupted in a blinding flash of green light. A deafening roar echoed through the hold, a sound that seemed to tear at the fabric of reality itself. The possessed figures shrieked in agony, their bodies dissolving into wisps of green smoke. The hold itself groaned in protest, the very air crackling with a malevolent energy. Then, with a final, earth-shattering tremor, the trawler split in two, the force of the explosion sending me flying through the air. I plunged into the churning sea, the wreckage of the trawler disappearing into the depths below. The fractured compass shard, a beacon of malevolent green light, slipped from my grasp and vanished into the inky abyss. As I bobbed in the unforgiving sea, the ocean a churning maw threatening to swallow me whole. A chilling realization dawned on me. The compass shard, my only hope of truly vanquishing the weeping eye, was gone. Had I destroyed the entity, or simply scattered its essence even further, like a malevolent virus on the wind? Panic, a cold serpent coiling around my heart, threatened to consume me. But then, a flicker of defiance sparked in my chest. I wouldn't succumb, not yet. Survival, a primal instinct, propelled me forward. With ragged gasps, I fought the relentless waves, the taste of salt stinging my lips. Exhaustion, a relentless tide, threatened to pull me under. The memory of Sarah, her face etched with fear, flickered before my eyes, a beacon in the growing darkness. Just as my vision began to blur, a dark shape emerged from the churning water. A monstrous shark, its sleek body a grotesque parody of power, circled me, its beady eyes glinting with predatory hunger. Terror, a primal scream, ripped from my throat. But amidst the fear, a chilling clarity bloomed. This was it, the final confrontation. Man versus monster. A dance of desperation played out on the unforgiving stage of the open sea. As the shark lunged, its massive jaws agape, a grotesque parody of a smile, I lunged forward too. With a surge of adrenaline that momentarily banished the pain coursing through my body, I grabbed the hilt of the cleaver still clutched in my hand and plunged it into the beast's underbelly. The water erupted in a crimson frenzy. The shark thrashed in a maddened dance, its powerful tail sending me flying through the air. I landed with a bone-jarring thud, the taste of blood metallic on my tongue. The beast circled again, its fury tinged with a maddening pain. But before it could launch another attack, a sickening gurgle erupted from its throat. The cleaver, buried deep within its flesh, had punctured a vital organ. With a final, earth-shattering roar, the shark convulsed, its massive body staining the water crimson. Then, in a slow, agonizing ballet, it sank into the inky abyss, taking the cleaver with it. Alone, adrift in the vast ocean, the weight of my actions pressed down on me like a physical force. Had I won, or had I simply prolonged the inevitable? The chilling truth echoed in the vast emptiness. There were no real victories in this war. Only survival, and the constant, gnawing fear of what horrors the fragmented essence of the weeping eye might unleash upon the world. As the relentless sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of bruised purple and orange, a single, solitary thought echoed in the desolate expanse of my mind. This wasn't over. It was just the beginning. The fight for survival, for vengeance, had taken on a global scale. And I, a broken man adrift in a sea of uncertainty, was all that stood between a world bathed in sunlight and a future shrouded in the malevolent green glow of the weeping eye. The ocean stretched before me, an endless horizon offering no solace, only the chilling promise of a terrifying new chapter. With a ragged breath, I closed my eyes, the rhythmic crash of waves against my battered body a grim lullaby. The fight had just begun. The ocean churned, a malevolent reflection of the storm brewing within me. The shark's crimson stain had dissipated, a cruel reminder of the temporary reprieve. Exhaustion gnawed at my bones, a relentless tide threatening to pull me under. But surrender wasn't an option, not with Sarah's face, etched with terror, forever burned into my memory. A flicker of movement on the horizon sent a jolt through my battered body. A ship, rescue, or perhaps, the true horror. Squinting through the salty spray, I saw not a vessel, but a monstrous island, its silhouette a jagged scar against the bruised sky. The weeping eye, a primal scream ripped from my throat, a sound swallowed by the howling wind. The fractured compass shard, pulsating with an unholy green light, materialized in my hand, a cruel twist of fate or the entity's sadistic amusement. Memories flooded back, the pulsating monolith, the grotesque creature, the desperate gamble. But this time, there would be no escape. This time, I would face the source. With a surge of adrenaline that defied my exhaustion, I began to swim, a solitary figure battling the relentless waves towards the looming island. The closer I got, the more the air crackled with a malevolent energy. The green glow emanating from the island throbbed like a diseased heart. As I reached the shore, a grotesque symphony of moans and shrieks assaulted my ears. Figures, their bodies twisted parodies of humanity, their eyes glowing with the same unholy green light, emerged from the jungle's depths. They were husks, vessels for the fragmented essence of the weeping eye, an army born from my own desperate gamble. Panic threatened to consume me, but the memory of Sarah, her voice a faint echo in the wind, steeled my resolve. I wouldn't let these horrors spread, not on my watch. Grasping the fractured compass shard, I lunged forward, a beacon of defiance amidst the grotesque throng. The battle that ensued was a whirlwind of violence and primal rage. I cleaved through the possessed, their green-lit eyes mirroring the monstrous entity behind them. Each blow fueled a desperate hope, a sliver of defiance against the encroaching darkness. But the possessed were relentless, their numbers overwhelming. Exhaustion clawed at me, my vision blurring with fatigue and the ever-present green glow. One by one, they fell, but for each one that crumpled, two more seemed to take its place. Just as I stumbled, my body screaming in protest, a grotesquely beautiful figure emerged from the jungle's depths. The entity, its form a coalescence of darkness and putrid flesh, pulsed with an unholy light. Its gaze, devoid of any humanity, locked onto me. "You destroyed my vessel," it rasped, its voice a cacophony of tortured screams. "But you cannot destroy me." With a surge of power, the entity unleashed a wave of green energy. The possessed surged forward, a tide of ravenous hunger. This was it, the final act, a desperate plan, fueled by a cocktail of rage and grief, erupted in my mind. Raising the fractured compass shard high, I focused all my remaining strength. The green light within it pulsed in response, a beacon against the encroaching darkness. "I may not destroy you," I roared, my voice hoarse but defiant, "but I can trap you again." With a final, earth-shattering scream, I plunged the shard into my own chest. A blinding white light erupted, engulfing the island, the possessed, the entity, everything. The world dissolved into a swirling vortex of light and sound. When the light faded, an eerie silence descended. The island stood deserted. The possessed figures vanished, the entity, gone. Or at least, that's what it seemed like. Exhaustion, a tidal wave, crashed over me. I slumped to the ground, the fractured compass shard slipping from my grasp. My vision swam, darkness encroaching at the edges. A single, chilling thought echoed in my fading consciousness. The weeping eye might be trapped, but at what cost? Had I become its new vessel? Or was this a different kind of prison altogether? As darkness claimed me, a single, faint green light flickered in my chest, a malevolent echo of the horror I'd faced. The battle might be over, but the war had just begun, and the battlefield was now my own shattered body. A horrifying smile stretched across my face, a grimace that spoke of both victory and despair. The weeping eye might be contained. A horrifying smile stretched across my face, a grimace that spoke of both victory and despair. The weeping eye might be contained, but the cost was a monstrous existence within my own flesh. A single, chilling chuckle escaped my lips, a sound that echoed across the deserted island, a promise of horrors yet to come.